Good evening, everybody, and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for the season finale of the Case King Pro Series in Season 9. What a fantastic championship. It has been 12 rounds, well, 11 rounds so far of just action-packed, drama-filled racing time after time, and it is going down to the wire at the wonderful Suzuka race circuit, where we're going to have 90 minutes of racing this evening, where the best drivers on the LFM platform are going to be going toe-to-toe for one last time this season to see who ends up being crowned a new Pro Series champion. Because your current candidates in the field that have the possibility of going for that title have ended up whittling their way down to the likes of Luke Whitehead and Grantas Kareckas. George Boothby, after a rather unfortunate outing at Imola last week, has unfortunately dropped so many points that doesn't realistically make him a contender in this final round. But Kareckas and Whitehead definitely have it all to play for. Now, I've been doing some maths in the background to try to put together what all of this ends up meaning, because with the two drop score rounds that we have here in the Pro Series season, things on the immediate points sheets aren't quite what they seem. So I'll try to put this into the simplest way that I can, because it is a little bit of a back and forth conversation we had earlier trying to work it out behind the scenes. So if Luke Whitehead fails to improve his tally this evening, and that means that he fails to score more than 883 points from today's race, Grantas Kareckas needs to realistically win in this field tonight to end up improving his score by around, I think, 1,654 points to then outscore his Veloce Esports teammate by a single point. Because if it was to go on countback, Luke Whitehead has 2 victories to his name. So regardless of whether or not Kareckas wins this evening, he would end up being crowned champion if they were to go to tiebreak. So, of course, the likelihood of Whitehead not improving his points total based on the level of consistency that he has had so far this season is fairly low chances, but we know anything can happen, and with 90 minutes of racing, and with the way in which sometimes of the lap ones we can have in these sorts of races, we cannot count out any eventualities. So if it is mathematically possible, it is still very much on the cards, and Whitehead will have to be very mindful of that when he is racing this evening. So we'll have to see how it all plays out in that for our drivers. And like I say, Suzuka, what a fantastic circuit to be hosting the finale of this season's Pro Series at. It is such a driver's circuit. It keeps you on your toes all the time when you are making your way around, and it is one that all drivers, I think, end up loving. Maybe not quite if you are in one of the cars that's a little bit weaker and a little bit trickier to wield around this circuit, but it is 18 turns of pure adrenaline, and I can't think of many other places that would be suitably fitting to have the Pro Series finale. So let's have a little bit of a look at what this circuit is like. So you make your way down the start-finish straight towards the first turn and make your way through those first couple of apexes. Tricky to get the car sometimes hooked up and stable through that sector. A lot of bravery needed. Then through the very iconic S-curves all the way up into Dunlop when you start to make your first bit of climb up towards the hill. Sometimes you'll see drivers running wide on the exit there and dipping a wheel in the gravel, and that can be very detrimental very quickly. Through the first and second Degner before going into the very tricky braking zone of turn 11 at the hairpin, and then the big drag race up towards the top of the hill towards the formidable spoon curve. Wrap your way through those 2 apexes, back down the hill towards 130R, which can be an absolutely deadly corner to certain cars around this circuit, through the Casio Triangle, and then rounding out the lap towards the start-finish line. And it's going to be a really interesting battle between cars this evening, because there's a few that are likely to be in the mix. One, the Porsches. Obviously a car that has been strong at nearly every single location that we have gone to. It's just got that sort of layout and package to it that whilst there are maybe certain places where it does struggle a little bit more so than others, it's always one that you can never count out. Then you've got something that's a little bit of a dark horse from time to time, the Mercedes, and has traditionally been very quick around here at Suzuka, so any of the drivers that are sporting that car tonight could be in a good position. Also the BMWs, after looking extremely strong at Imola last week, where we saw Andre McClay take his maiden victory in the Pro Series with a fantastic drive and ended up pipping Luke Whitehead to the post in that one. Suzuka, another circuit where the BMW is likely to be a pretty good package because it's got a reasonable amount of downforce, good on the tyre wear, and it's got nice straight line speed to really be able to motor along in those long straight sections and make the overtakes happen. And that's something you've got to be worried about if you're in the Porsche, because if you do end up in traffic, it's so difficult to make the overtakes happen in the areas of this circuit where the Porsche is strong, and that's inherently and been traditionally one of the weak sides of that car. Then cars like the Ferraris, the Aston Martins, McLaren, they're likely to maybe struggle a little bit. And then you've got the likes of the Honda, which is kind of, I think, a little bit of an in-between. It's not going to ultimately be the best, but it, of course, has a lot of grunt, and certain sections of this circuit really do require horsepower. So that is a car that could still very much be on the cards when you've got it in the hands of someone like George Boothby, who really will just be going hell for leather in this final round. He may be out of the net championship fight, but P2 still potentially on the cards if he can put together a strong race today and big prizes for all of the top 3 finishers in this championship. So he'll still be looking very much to get himself into a competitive position by the end of it. The server is up, so we'll be making our way across into that in just a moment. And of course, with 90 minutes on the clock as well, we have another factor to be considering, and that is whether or not we're going to have any changeable weather for this evening's racing. Because if we do, that is something that could really change the dynamic over which cars end up being stronger. I'd imagine if we do have some wet weather, the Porsches are likely to extend their advantage over what I would consider the next fastest car of the Mercedes, because the Mercedes has fantastic grunt and outright power, but in terms of how it behaves traditionally with net performance, wet weather driving, tyre wear, it's not the strongest aspect of that car. And that is something that drivers in that car are going to really have to take into consideration. So changeable conditions could very likely have a big effect on the outcome of this race. I'm afraid in the background that my game was fantastically crashed immediately. So apologies, we will be making our way into the server in just a moment. And we'll hopefully then have everything up and running in due course. But while we wait for that to fire up again, do want to say a big thank you to everybody who has been subscribing to the channel, supporting, because I know there wasn't a stream last week, unfortunately, but we did in that time between now and round 10 at Indianapolis cross over another little threshold in the subscriber count, over 2,200 subs now on the channel. So thank you everybody so much for all of the support that has been ongoing for this channel since it first started in August of last year. Amazing to have as many of you along for this journey and enjoying the streams week after week. And of course, also, just a quick time to mention that if you do want to get involved in some of the racing that you've been seeing over the last 12 weeks, then of course do head over to the lowfuelmotorsport.com website, and then you can sign yourself up, get yourself a license, work your way through the ranks, and then look to compete for some fantastic prizes across a multitude of different series. We've got, of course, the Pro Series, where the best of the best on the LFM platform duke it out for some amazing prizes, but there is also all of the daily racing action with the shorter, some of the slightly longer races, as well as the endurance races on Sundays as well. Of course, if ACC isn't quite your thing either, then R Factor 2 is now on the LFM platform, has been doing wonders with the likes of touring cars, GT, prototypes, single-seaters, you name it. So there's a little bit of everything for everyone. So if you want to get involved in some of that, then do not hesitate to head over there and look at some of that. Hopefully, all things being well, when we now have our next attempt into the server, that we will be able to make our way in nice and tidily, fingers crossed, and then we can start to see how our drivers are faring. They'll have a short bit of practice to get their final setups dialed in and ready for qualifying, and then all will be kicking off for a 15-minute qualifying session before 90 minutes of action, like I say, around Suzuka for this evening. Of course, in typical fashion, things in the background on my end are going wonderfully badly, which I feel is a suitable way for the final race of the season to end up going, because we have had a drama non-stop in every single race, so why stop the drama on the track? We're going to add a little bit into it in the actual stream side of things as well. Those are new to the channel. I'm afraid I do all of this on a single monitor, which can sometimes make life a little bit tricky to coordinate things, but I do think that hopefully on this next attempt into the server that all should be well, and it is indeed. So we'll get that stuff fired up with the overlays in just a moment, and then we can see how everybody is getting on as they make their way around the track. Just about 5 minutes left on the clock, and they will have the opportunity to kind of go down a couple of different routes for this one, that they can either look to get those final elements of practice in place for qualifying so that they feel as fresh and ready going into qualifying as possible, and then really to try to leave nothing on the table in that session. We know how important qualifying can be in these Pro Series races. It makes such a difference sometimes in the opening lap, because depending on whereabouts you start in the race can have a massive influence on whether or not you make it through all the chaos, all the drama in the opening phase of the race. And then if you survive that, then you've got everything else to contend with later on with what this sort of circuit and this championship will end up throwing at you. So we'll get the last bits of the overlay all sorted, and we can now see how our drivers are getting on. And I think, so Grantas Kareckas right now top of the timing sheets in the #1 Veloce Esports Porsche. He has really pulled away with that #1 plate in terms of the LFM ELO ratings. Those that are new to the series, the numbering system that we have here at LFM is based on the relative ELO of each of these drivers, and Grantas Kareckas is your #1 man in the server and just on the LFM platform in general. That title went to Trevor Wenham for a very long time. Then Marco Bischoff ended up taking those honours, but then this man, a Lithuanian, that has been doing wonders in all of the races in the Pro Series over the last couple of seasons, as well as daily racing and all of that. He takes a little bit of exploring on the inside line on the back straight. Has rocketed up to, I think, over 7,000 ELO now, about 7,200, I do believe, for Grantas. So fantastic achievements from him, and hopefully if he does go onto a flyer on the next lap, we'll be able to go on board with the #1 car. He's rounding out a very stellar effort at the moment to really dip further into the 59, 3/10 of a second up on his previous best, and hits the finish line in just a moment, a little bit further along than you would expect, but he is going to start a lap. Let's go on board with the #1 car, firing it in towards turn 1 for the first time. Goes slightly wide of apex. See, kick of oversteer for the Porsche. We're used to seeing the back end of this car sliding around, but quick hands from the #1 driver in towards the SSN of 3, then 4. They come at you thick and fast, drifting his way around, and a little bit too much drifting there. Got a bit too enthusiastic, and I think the rear tyres maybe feeling a little bit cooked after that one and giving out. So we'll have to see if we can hop on board with someone else in just a moment. We've got Robin Schaefer completing a lap, making his way to the middle sector. Who's about to go towards the line now? Is that the #9? No, I think it might be the #8 car. It is, of Mattia De Campo for Team Suzuka, #8 Ferrari. Heading towards the start finish line. So we'll see whether or not this lap ends up lasting any longer. And also we'll get a very quick comparison for how these cars behave in the first couple of turns. We saw Grantas really sliding around there, a little bit more control for the Ferrari, but then a bit too much speed carried on the entry. Got to be careful of that, using the runoff on the exit of turn 2, and now making his way in towards the S's. Here, how much longer he's off the throttle. That's the agility that the Porsche has. Of course, Grantas didn't quite hold it together towards turn 5, but just going to show how quickly that car can really change direction. That is why the Porsche is so fast around here, despite its power deficit. Climbing through Dunlop Curve now, up towards the first egg. A couple of very tricky corners, especially for the Ferrari. Doesn't respond to the bumps very nicely, and staying a little bit wide of that apex. And I don't blame Mattia for that whatsoever. Under the bridge you go, and climbing away towards a very tricky braking zone of turn 11 at the hairpin. Then you see different lines on the entry here. A little bit of camber on the inside of this corner as well, and then a potential overtaking opportunity for those cars that have a bit more grunt in the either under the bonnet or in the rear, depending on the placement of the engine. The likes of the Mercedes, the BMWs, they'll be quick up this part of the circuit. You now head in towards Spoon Curve of turn 13. Make your way between the two apexes, and using the AstroTurf, beautifully demonstrated by the Italian, then carrying all that speed on the exit. A little bit of runoff used towards the back straight. And that's part of the circuit where the Ferrari, the high downforce on board this car, ends up behaving very nicely. Now towards 130R, big commitment required here. See a little bit of a lift, and then towards the Casio triangle for the final time. Spot your braking point, and you'll see some cars are comfortable taking quite a chunk of go, but the Ferrari really gets chucked around through there, so being a bit more cautious. Nice use of the AstroTurf on the exit of the final turn then, and as Mattia heads towards the start-finish line, we'll see what it's going to be. Big improvement on his previous lap time, and it is good enough for P6 in the practice session, a 2:02.97, but it is Kareckas that has gone fastest so far in this little warm-up, with Schaefer, Addison, Vassner, and Jurkovic, I think, maybe making their debut in the Pro Series. So we'll be going over to qualifying in just a moment, as I think Sigilentas, the last car on circuit for Yeet Sports, in that very nicely liveried number 24 car. We'll get a quick close-up of that one. We'll see this one, obviously, more in action later on. But yeah, very nice livery put together for the Yeet Sports crew. I think in actual fact, one more driver. Who's that in the 25 car? That is Eric Conrad, another one of the Yeet Sports cars, and he is going to practice the pit entry a little bit as well. Of course, that is somewhere where you can really throw away your race if you get the braking point wrong. And excuse me, there was actually one more car out on circuit. It's this man, George Boothby, one of the winningest drivers in the Pro Series, of course. And whilst this championship hasn't quite gone the way in the closing stages, and he would have liked, and he had a couple of no-shows, and those no-shows have really ended up coming back to bite him in terms of his attempts to go for the championship crown, but still definitely all to play for in terms of P2 against his Veloce Esports teammates, as I believe they all actually sit 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the championship. Excuse me, not quite. Hutchinson, actual fact, I got that all wrong. Hutchinson is in 4th place, with Bischoff in 5th and Samir 6th, who is, I believe, now part of the Yassi crew, followed up by his 2 Yassi teammates of Jardier and Valentin Barris. A little bit spread out between the 2 sister teams, but a very dominant contribution towards the top 10. So qualifying now underway, then 15 minutes to get the best lap time possible out of their cars and see what they can do. Sean Tempest is going to be the first car out on this circuit for Couch Potato Racing. So maybe Couch Potato Racing by name, but anyone in the top split of the Pro Series, certainly no Couch Potato in terms of race pace, and that BMW, I imagine, is going to be pretty speedy in today's race, as well as the fact that the 90 minutes, I think, is really going to be favouring that car a bit, because it does tend to preserve its tyres quite nicely, and that's something that could be a bit of a disadvantage for the likes of the Porsches, the Hondas, where they've got that good raw pace that they can really execute over one lap, maybe over a relatively short stint. But we saw how much movement Kareckas' Porsche had through those S's, and whilst that may be quick, it is going to wear those tyres out, whereas the cars like the BMW, they tend to just kind of flow through the corners that little bit nicer. Also expect the Mercedes to lose out further on in the race as well, because they will really start to scrub the tyres on that car. I know a little bit firsthand myself, haven't been quite in the rig in a while on ACC, but the last time I drove the Mercedes, admittedly, was pre-BOP changes to that car, but it's still definitely one of those cars that really burns through its front tyres very, very quickly. You see Walsingham in the background, who has been very quick in that car and has done a stellar job with it all season long, and he will be a very good benchmark, see what sort of pace is on board that car. First laps in qualifying then getting underway, and number 15 car, excuse me, where's Sean Tempest? There we go, number 15 of Sean Tempest, who went on board with his teammate for a moment there, making his way through the S's, and you see just looking, and just even kind of audibly, the BMW just has a sense of calmness about it. Admittedly, it is a little bit deceptive at times. It has that rather quieter engine note, not quite as savage as something like the V10s or V8s that we hear from other GT3 cars. So it is deceptive at times, but it is a car a little bit like the Aston Martin. It's fairly forgiving, and it just encourages you to really push and extract as much pace out of it as possible, making his way in towards that hairpin now, nicely tucked into that apex. You'll see drivers taking a variety of lines on the entry into that corner, trying to potentially set up a nice exit towards Spoon Curve there. We'll take a bit of a reference as well from the speed that Tempest gets up here. So I saw about 236 kilometers an hour when he got Spoon Curve. We'll compare that to the likes of the Porsche in not too long, and we'll really start to get an interesting difference there. I'm trying to grab the Mercedes of Walsingham at some point as well, because that is an area of circuit where the V8 grunt, the torque under the bonnet of that car really starts to pay dividends in that part of the circuit. 130R BMW should be fairly well planted through here, and nice and easy as you like, taking a chunk of curb on the apex. Some cars really do not like that. In the early stages of the race, a Mercedes on cold tyres is often one that really is tricky to get through there, and we'll have to see how our drivers cope with that. Tempiso rounding out the first lap in the qualifying session, making his way towards the timing beam, and as he crosses the line, it's a 159.4, so immediately into 59, 58.6 for Walsingham there, and 300ths of a second faster than Grantas Kareckas. And I tell you what, Walsingham could really put a cat amongst the pigeons today with the likes of Grantas Kareckas trying to go for a race victory, obviously, to if he wants to walk away with the championship. A Walsingham, at least in qualifying trim, is going to be very quick in that Mercedes indeed. We'll have a look at those two when they make their way up Spoon Curve. Chris Sang returning to the championship in the BMW has made his way up in towards P9 for the time being, and went purple in the middle sector as well. So BMW behaving nicely through that part of the lap for the driver from Hong Kong. And then it is Schaefer and Hutchinson that then currently sit in your top 5. I tell you what though, Walsingham absolutely blistering pace on this lap so far. George Boothby has gone up to the front row for the time being. Jardier's just gone in towards P8, but the only driver that's really making a significant improvement right now is Walsingham. He's getting a nice toe off the BMW in front, and we'll see what sort of speed is. Almost 240 kilometers an hour by the time he got towards Spoon Curve there. So 3 kilometers an hour over the over the BMW that we saw earlier on. Let's see, can we catch a Porsche that's making their way? We'll stay on board with Marco Bischoff and see how he gets on there. In actual fact, I think Walsingham might round out his lap a little bit before that, and it's going to be a very, very powerful one. BMW getting out of the way, and Walsingham has carried all of that slipstream towards the Casio Triangle. This is a blistering lap there from the British driver in the number 13 car. I think trying to go for his first pole position in the Pro Series. George Boothby, though, not letting off the pace whatsoever. So what's it going to be for Walsingham then as he hits the start-finish line? It's a big lap time, 58.3. Kareckas improving by a couple of tenths as well. Goes for 58.4. George Boothby still maintaining 0.2 of a second. 235 kilometers an hour for Boothby out top of the hill, so not competing with the Mercedes or the BMW. Close to the BMW, but the Mercedes in a league of its own right there. Makoski, great lap from him to go up into P4. Luke Whitehead right now only in P6. He'll want to make his way a bit further up the order. He'll just want to apply the pressure to Kareckas. He doesn't need to outright beat him by any stretch of the imagination, but he does need a solid result. Hutchinson, Mr. Consistency for a lot of this season for Jean Lacey Esports in the Ferrari on a big lap time up to the front row for the number 6 car, and does a 58.422. Great effort there from him. And we'll stay with Kareckas now, as he's not on too much of an improvement, but we will get our first reference when the camera picks him back up again as he makes his way towards Spoon Curve. Gained a lot of time in the hairpin there for a moment, but carried, I think, too much speed on the entry and ended up losing it on the exit. So let's see how's the Porsche fare by the time it gets to the top of the hill. 233, so he's almost 7 kilometers an hour down on the Mercedes of Walsingham at the top of the hill, and that is just a pure out-and-out torque and grunt, and that's the sort of level of difference that we are talking about here, and it's reasons like that as to why Walsingham in that Mercedes is going to be mighty, mighty quick today. Hutchinson having returned to the pits. Kareckas still there or thereabouts on his previous lap time, but not too much of an improvement. See how he fares through the Casio Triangle. Takes a chunk of curb there, big risk taken from the Lithuanian driver, and I think it's... Oh, it almost looks like it had come off, but he's lost the time on the exit. I think maybe a smidge of an improvement, taking the shortest line he possibly can towards the start-finish line, but I don't think it's going to be much. It is just enough to displace Hutchinson for the front row, and sits exactly a tenth of a second behind Walsingham there. Bischoff having just finished his lap. Did Bischoff have a bit of a sideways moment there? We'll try to see if we can catch it on the replay. If the replay will... there we go. And, oh, there you go. Gets a little bit of oversteer. That is on the middle part of Spoon. And interestingly enough, a similar thing, I remember, I do seem to recall, there was a big thing on iRacing, actually, about that curb that, yeah, it was kind of one of these instant spin style curbs. And even though it's not quite as prevalent in ACC, it is a little bit of a tricky one at times. And those cars are a bit more on the edge, maybe not quite feeling as comfortable. Certainly puts a lot of strain on the dynamics of those cars, and it will be a tricky one to make work. Jardier making his way out of Spoon Curve himself now in the number 4 car. Not quite the season he would have had. He's taken one race victory here in what was a very dramatic Paul Ricard with acing the strategy, but he hasn't quite had the luck and performance from round to round that he would have wanted, but still has opportunity today in Suzuka, currently sitting in P15, deep on the brakes though, and I think that's going to be it for the number 4 car's improvement, because he lose all that time on the exit, and yeah, there's going to be no improvement there for the Czech driver. What about the man from Greece for TF Racing, Miles Gerardis, who has had a little bit of a shakier start to the season, but particularly in the latter half, has been extracting very good pace out of that BMW time after time, and has very much been up there with some of the fastest drivers in the top split. Kareckas, as Hutchinson did make an improvement and sits 7 thousandths. Oh, excuse me, it hasn't set another lap time yet. Do ignore me. Luke Whitehead has just started a lap. He brought out the white flag a moment ago, and he's got a little bit of traffic potentially just in front of him, so hopefully that won't cause any issues on his laps. Go on board with your championship leader. We saw his teammate in practice get it all wrong through this section of the circuit, but the man that has been so dominant and consistent in this championship, drifting wide through turn 6 then. Both of these Veloce cars just looking a little bit on the sketchy side, not quite the sort of level of handling that they maybe want to, but of course they could have 2 different setups between qualifying and the race. Often these top level drivers will have very extreme differences actually between the two, and they'll have something that's a lot more stable, a lot more caring and nurturing to those tyres for race trim. But at least right now in qualifying, Sunny looks a little bit on the sketchy side to drive, and Whitehead not extracting the sort of pace that he would have wanted. Kareckas has found a 10th in the opening sector, and he only needs a 10th to displace Walsingham. And Hutchinson as well, also going very quickly. But again, I think a little bit of a misleading split there for a moment as he went through the hairpin, carrying a bit too much speed. Anderson further down the order, though, in P12. In the number 11 BMW South African driver is a couple of tenths up on his personal best. And that would see him get further down in towards the 58. Into Casio Triangle he goes. BMW should be fairly settled through this part of the lap. Couple of hops and skips and jumps towards the start-finish line there. Jardier improving up to P12 and then going to the pits. Only 3 minutes left on the clock for these guys. Addison, though, rounding out the lap, and he goes up to P9, so in towards the top 10 for Luke Addison in all of that. Walsingham has improved a little bit on his lap time. Kareckas, once again, there or thereabouts, and we saw that 0-0 split was enough to make his way in front of Hutchinson last time around, so we'll have to see how that fares to the end. But I'll tell you what, Walsingham right now looking very quick. I'm not sure he's going to be able to extract enough pace in the closing stages to head towards the 57s, but I tell you what, he's going to be put under a lot of pressure because Kareckas, a Lithuanian who has still not taken victory in the Pro Series on a mighty lap, and it's going to be close to 0.02 of a second separates him and the Mercedes, and he will go for one more flyer. So hopefully he's got enough fuel on board to go for a couple of laps here, but this could be the final effort from Kareckas. Walsingham rounding out his lap now, just coming out of Spoon Curve. Nicely planted there, but lost a little bit of time on the exit. Kareckas not particularly improving on his previous lap time. Whitehead in towards the hairpin, up by a tenth of a second, though wide on the entry. Whitehead not looking as dialed in to his car that we've often seen. And, you know, he's currently got 8 positions between himself and Kareckas. May not be the end of the world, but I was doing some estimates early on, and I did work out that if Kareckas wants to win this race and Whitehead was to finish around the kind of either top, about 10th position or a little bit further down, it's going to get mighty close on the standings. So Whitehead really wants to try to recover some time if he can. Walsingham didn't quite improve at the end of that lap, but has gone on to another one. Hutchinson has found a little bit time, more or less equal, though, to his previous best. We'll see what Whitehead's able to do in the final sector and head his way through the Casio Triangle. 0.2 up. Oh, that looked a little bit awkward, though. Out of the final corner, it has affected his exit. Seemed to get popped out a bit by the AstroTurf. They'll have one more flyer after this. Currently a 10th up. Should improve him towards the top 5. Only good enough for P6, though, just behind George Boothby. Question in the chat for the standings. If you head over to the lowfuelmotorsport.com website, and then head to the Pro Series and then to the Series standings page, you can see the current standings that the drivers have. Now, there's a little bit of a mishmash in terms of the way in which the drop scores are currently impacting on the results that you see up there. So it's not 100% representative, but will give you hopefully a bit of a better indication of where everyone sits. Walsingham on what will be his last attempt, currently not improving. Kareckas only through the first turn and is there or thereabouts as well. Hutchinson has a lot of lap time left to go as well, and they're all more or less there with their previous lap times. Bischoff will get one more out of this, up to P11 for the German driver. Not quite the pace that we have seen from him. He's had a bit of a topsy-turvy season. Yellow flag for Hutchinson there, so no further improvements for the Canadian driver. We'll try to see why he's buried it in the wall when the replay comes on through, and I think that's the reason why. And there you go, flying across your screen and heading into the Shadow Realm, and no further improvement for the Ferrari driver. What about Walsingham, though? He's up a little bit. It's going to be close with his previous best. Can he extend the advantage over Kareckas? And he doesn't quite. He was 100th down on his previous lap time. And what about Kareckas? What can he do? He's currently a 10th down on his previous effort. Whitehead no higher up than P6 then. Boothby in the pits as well. Robin Schaefer, great effort there from him in the BMW to currently get himself in towards P4. Haven't got too many other drivers improving at the moment. Dom Healy down in 30th at the moment in the Wild Things Aston Martin, goes up to 25th position. But right now, it's all eyes on this man. He needs a perfect race today. He needs that victory that has escaped him time after time. If he wants to come away with the championship today, we've commended how consistent he has been over and over again, but he's never quite had enough to take victory. He's had pole positions, but I don't think it's going to be another one to add to the Lithuanians' tally today. And I think with that effort from Kareckas, and it was an improvement, and so he will start no higher than P2. And Jardier rounding out a lap as well to a 58.7. He goes up to P13. Bischoff on a small improvement. Well, 10th up for him. Actually could get his way up towards P7, I think, if he rounds out the lap pretty nicely. As he heads towards the timing beam, it will be exactly on the money for P7 then. And that will be your final qualifying session of the season. We'll have a look through our grid in just a moment. But Walsingham getting the job done in qualifying, and a fantastic effort from him to put that one together. We knew the Mercedes was going to be quick, and I said it was going to be one to watch, particularly in qualifying trim, but it is not easy to put together whatsoever at times. It's a tricky car to drive, but the British driver doing a fantastic job of that. And we will have to see how he gets on in the race, whether or not he's able to maintain pace throughout the entirety of this 90 minutes long stint around this Suzuka circuit, because those front tyres are going to be screaming in the latter stages in particular. Just waiting for the qualifying results to come through. And I do believe they have just done exactly that. And then we can have a look at our grid. So Walsingham starts on a pole position for the final round of the season with Grantas Kareckas, who is trying to make his way towards the championship lead at the very death of it. In the number 1 car, starts on the front row. Hutchinson starts in P3, the Canadian. Great effort from him in the Ferrari. Not the strongest car around here, and another solid effort from him. Robin Schaefer, the first of your BMWs, starting in P4. That could be a car to watch, and certainly spoil the party for our sort of more normal contenders at the front of the field. George Boothby in P5, alongside his Veloce Esports teammate in P6 of your current championship leader, Luke Whitehead. The reigning 2-time Pro Series champion, Marco Bischoff. It won't be 3 on the bounce, but maybe able to sneak his way up into P4 in the standings if he has a mega round today. Starts in P7. Great effort from Patrick Jurgovitz in the number 26 Mercedes. Fantastic stuff from him. Starts in P8 with Manos Drandis. Another solid qualifying session from him to start in P9, just ahead of the final driver rounding out the top 10 positions, Krzysztof Makowski in the number 23 BMW. Following the BMW train, Luke Addison, the South African, starts in P11 in number 11, with Chris Sang, the Hong Kong driver, starting in P12, with Jardier then starting in P13. He'll be joined on the 7th row of the grid with his Yas Heat teammate Samir Fock in that very recognisable livery that we've had for a couple of seasons now to start in P14. Schneckenberger, the next of the Mercedes, will start in P15 with Marcus Marquezing with a very striking livery. We'll have to get a close-up of that in just a moment. Won't be missing that one anytime soon. Lovely stuff on the Mercedes there. Starts in P16. Mattia De Campo for Suzuka. Next of the Ferrari starts in P17. Louis Bubbling, who we've seen had some very strong pace in that Porsche previously, starting maybe further down the order than we would have expected to see from him after some great showings earlier on in the season, but still, long race, has opportunities to make his way through the pack. Sean Tempest starting in P19 with Jan Drexler rounding out the top 20, and Samuel Ratz in that bright pink Ferrari. Once again, starting in 21st position. Sasha Vassner, the next of the LFM cars, starting in 22nd place, with Michael Frey in the number 28 Porsche, the Swiss driver, starting just ahead of Benny Witter. the German for Yeet Sports and the first of the Yeet Sports crew. I think we've got 3 of them in the server this evening, all part of the BMW M4 lineup for this evening's action. Dom Healy for Wild Things Racing starting in 25th position, ahead of Siggy Lentus, the next of our Swiss drivers, ahead of his teammate in the number 25 car, Eric Conrad, rounding out that little Yeet Sports trio, and then Christopher Hoffman, the next and I think last of the BMWs to start in 28th position, with Kay Zeisler, the Czech driver, starting in 29th position, with Jonathan Clifford in the Lamborghini, a car he's been sporting for multiple seasons now, the American driver, and the only American driver, I think, in the server, in that bright green liveried car for tonight. And then Ralph Melansky will then round out the order, as we will then get everything sorted and ready for 90 minutes of action here at Suzuka this evening. But getting the job done in qualifying was this man, Aidan Walsinger. Fantastic efforts from him to put it all together, but still has plenty of laps that he needs to do if he wants to get a maiden victory in the Pro Series. But definitely one of his best opportunities with the inherent pace that that car has. But with the likes of Kareckas, who is really going to be applying the pressure to him if he wants to try to go for the championship win, will certainly not be wanting to allow the Brit to run away. But I think it's going to be tricky, though, for Kareckas. I think his best bet, if he wants to get victory today, I think he needs to make that position in the opening couple of corners, because that Mercedes is going to be blisteringly fast on the straights, and I just don't see that unless Kareckas has a bit of an unusual setup on board the Porsche, which we have seen from the likes of Whitehead in the past, and goes for a lower wing, then maybe he can compete with a Mercedes. But given how sketchy that car was looking in qualifying, I somehow find that hard to believe. So I think there'll be quite a bit of wing bolted onto the back of the number 1 car in the server. And I think he's really going to be relying on that acceleration, the agility through the opening series of corners to try to get ahead of Walsingham in that Mercedes and get a gap before they have that first run towards 130R. Because if he can, the Porsches can go flat out through 130R, which is still something that I find mind-blowing to this day. They have so much downforce and they're so much slower by the end of that straight that they can go flat out. So they have a fairly easy time in that car, whereas the Mercedes, on the other hand, approaches that corner several kilometers faster, several kilometers an hour, faster than any other car in this server. And we know the Mercedes' strong suit is not particularly agility or high-speed cornering, so it's very tricky in the opening lap. So even if you are being hunted down by that Mercedes, I don't think Walsingham will be particularly wanting to try to go down the inside or side-by-side into 130R anytime soon in the opening lap. So Kareckas, I really think, if he wants to come away with victory today, he either needs to do it on strategy and go for a big undercut over Walsingham, hoping that his race pace is able to keep him ahead, or he needs to try to do it in the first lap. Either way, it's a big ask for the Lithuanian. Whitehead currently sitting in P6. If he were to just simply maintain that position, that would be enough for the British driver to take the championship. And with so much on the line here in the Pro Series, with some fantastic prizes, you absolutely can bet on the fact that these drivers are going to be pushing extremely hard. You've got kind of some rogue entities as such in the likes of Schaefer, Jurkovic, those drivers that aren't quite around those top 3 positions, don't have so much to lose. They'll just be looking to enjoy themselves in the final round of what has been an absolutely fantastic championship. So join me then for what will be the last time here in Season 9 for the Case King Pro Series, where it'll be 90 minutes of action here at Suzuka Race Circuit, where Walsingham will lead them towards Turn 1. And who's it going to go to? Will it be Kareckas or Whitehead at the end of today for your next Pro Series champion? We'll have to wait and find out. And now waiting for those green lights to come on. Patience required between these guys. And there we go. And it looks like a fairly even start at the front of the field. Drag race between Kareckas and Walsingham towards the first turn. And the overlap going in favour of the Mercedes. Side-by-side action already between the cars behind as we go on board the Helicam, trying to capture everything that's going on. The two Veloce cars of Whitehead and Boothby side-by-side on the exit as well. And boxed in from the BMW is Whitehead, so can't make up the position. No yellow flags as of yet. Big slide from Schaefer, and he drops in the gravel, and that allows Boothby, Whitehead, and almost Bischoff through in all of that as well as they make their way towards Dunlop Curve for the very first time. But your race lead event still Walsingham, followed by Kareckas, Hutchinson P3. Kareckas already applying the pressure, trying to get towards that inside line, but the grunt of the Mercedes is going to come good. But on the drag race towards the hairpin end, is there anything that Kareckas can do to try to hunt down that Mercedes that sits in P1 as they all fly through there pretty evenly? A little bit side-by-side action between some of the cars in the background there, but nothing the Porsche driver can do as they all look at the back of that Mercedes on the first run towards the top of the hill. Bit of a wide exit, I think, for Bischoff, and he may be vulnerable to the Mercedes of Jurkovic in the number 26 car, because we know the power that this Mercedes is going to have, and he's already making it work on the drag race up the hill, but towards the defensive line from Bischoff. Then a lot of skill and talent in that cockpit. Maybe not the ideal season for the German and the reigning two-time champion, but enough to fend off the number 26 car towards there. Walsingham still leads then ahead of Kareckas and Hutchinson. It's all very close and feisty further down the order. We've got Chris Tang versus Luke Anderson, and Jardier trying to hold off Schneckenberger in the Mercedes side by side already between those two. That's going to get tricky. Very wide line for Schneckenberger on the exit there. Jardier is going to concede the position, I think, a little bit moving under braking, but they make it through there okay. I think Samuel Ratz down the inside, almost sent around as he goes side by side with Sean Temp. Is now wide on the exit. There's going to have Michael Frey to deal with in just a moment as well. But first run towards then turn one after the opening lap. Walsingham still leads by half a second. Kareckas, Hutchinson, Boothby, Whitehead all in hot pursuit. And Robin Schaefer was close to the gearbox there of Whitehead and immediately looking to try to reclaim some of those positions he lost after that mistake through the opening series of corners. Very tricky and demanding part of the circuit on cold tyres. I tell you what though, Walsingham though, really trying to extend the advantage early on, and will also just grab an onboard for a moment with Whitehead. See as he looks to follow that Veloce Esports car in front of him. Be this part of the circuit where the advantage goes in favour of the Porsche, but watch that Honda start to pull away, already gaining ground on the run towards the first Degner, and then it's this constant back and forth series of momentum. You see Kareckas up ahead, absolutely glued to the back of the Mercedes, but then it becomes a horsepower game as you make your way out of the hairpin and towards Spoon Curve there. Wide moments for Walsingham. Just for a second there, I thought it was all going to go wrong. He holds on to that position. Boothby coming under pressure from Whitehead once again, but the Honda then puts the loud pedal down to the floor and extends several car lengths over. And there's one car around. Siggy Lentus has gone around further down the order. Not sure what happened to the number 24 car. We'll try to grab a replay of that. It's taking a moment for us to be able to see it, and contact there with, I think now, Sasha Vassner in the Porsche. End up also losing the position to Benny Vitter in all of that. The Yeet Esports teammate to Siggy Lentus, who has got going again, but losing a lot of time. Luke Whitehead coming under pressure immediately from the BMW of Robin Schaefer, that is going to have a great bit of straight line speed advantage. But Whitehead in the tow, able to hold on for the time being. I think Christoph Hosman just got past Sasha Vassner on the drag race towards 130R. White flag out for Jardier. I'm not sure what happened there in the middle of Casio Triangle, but has maintained the position. How's it all faring between these guys towards turn one? Covering that inside line is Bischoff from the Mercedes of Jurkovic. And he's got enough of an advantage to keep that number 26 car behind for the time being, who's got all the pressure from Gerardis, the Greek driver, in that number 14 BMW, as they wind their way through, snaking this beautiful line of GT3 cars through the S's. One more time. And just in the opening 5 minutes, it has been absolutely all a go from these drivers. Tell you what, though, Walsingham, great starts for him. Opening lap and opening flyer sets a fastest lap of the race, 59.2 then, and extended advantage over Kareckas by almost a second. So really has the pace in the early phase of this race. Whether or not, though, as those tyres start to wear, it will be the same story. We will have to wait and see. Let's go on board with Robin Schaefer. Let's see, is he able to do anything about the Porsche of Whitehead in front, who is getting a little bit of an extra cushion of defence here, ironically, from his Veloce Esports teammate in the Honda of George Boothby, who won't be doing exactly consciously. These two have battled a lot in the championship so far, though not too much in terms of actual on-track action between these two, although Boothby now applying the pressure, in actual fact, to Hutchinson, who hasn't quite been able to stick with the leading duo. And Schaefer now is gaining nicely, and Whitehead's feeling a little bit of pressure towards 130R. Schaefer, he's not looking for the outside line there, he's looking just to get out of the slipstream so he doesn't lose so much momentum. I don't like it when cars start moving like that, but I think we're okay, and Schaefer still has to sit behind the likes of Whitehead for the time being. He gains down the back straight, but then Whitehead is able to fight back on the exit of 130R because of the amount of cornering speed he is able to maintain in that Porsche. Further down the order, scrap taking place between Malansky in one of the sole Audis we have in the grid. Number 27 car applying the pressure to Zeisler in the Aston Martin just in front. Oh, and it's side-by-side between Jurkovic and Bischoff towards turn 1. And it was a move that was sizing up not too long ago. And the BMW of Gerard is trying to get involved in this as well. He can't make it stick. What about Samir versus Marcus Marquezing in that very striking Mercedes? Will go on board the rear diffuser of Samir's car. And there it is. And I'm sure that is filling up the mirrors, almost psychedelic in the rearview mirrors for Samir then, but holding off the Mercedes. But it is just such a powerhouse. And down the start finish straight on the run towards 130R. Oh, that was a mistake though for Marquezing. Almost allowed Louis Bubbling to find an opportunity. They're still battling on the run up towards the first exit then, and that's got very awkward between himself and Sean Tempest, who's continuing to have a busy time and almost goes completely off onto the gravel. Someone that I think has had a bigger moment though is Zeisler further down the order. I think he allowed both Conrad and Malansky to gain positions in all of that, and there you go. And I was saying you have to watch out for that on the exit of Dunlop Curve, and he's dipped wheel in the gravel, bounces away along. Thankfully, nothing too major, but does lose 2 positions in the process. George Boothby hunting down Hutchinson. We haven't seen exactly what the Ferrari is capable of down this back straight, so we'll go on board the rear diffuser of this Ferrari then. Let's see how much grunt has the Honda got in this part of the circuit. It's not going to be quite Mercedes levels, but it is definitely better than the Ferrari. But the Ferrari gets a good exit out of Spoon Curve, and it's planted through 130R, and that is crucial and important. I'll tell you what though, this is where the Honda could gain, because it still has good acceleration. It's much happier over these curbs, and the Ferrari, although fairly nicely handled by the Canadian there, it just doesn't quite have the same level of composure. Samuel Ratz further down the order has had a busy time through 130R, I do believe. Let's see if we can see what happened to the number 19 car. Oh dear, and it was, I think, if there was either contact on the exit 130R there, or just the car giving way underneath the number 19 driver, but he managed to keep that one barely together, almost Kobayashi style on the exit of that corner, and that could have been a lot worse. Mistake just behind from the BMW of Benny Witt of Alaus Hoffman to try to sneak onto his good turn towards the outside line though, in towards the inside for the next pile of the S's, but the door is shut by the number 29 in front, and they will stay as they were. Meanwhile, at the front of the pack, Walsingham still leads by 1.2 seconds, followed by Kareckas, Hutchinson, Boothby, who is having the pressure applied by his Veloce Esports teammate and current championship leader, Luke Whitehead. And there's a little bit of a gap further down to Robin Schaefer and Marco Bischoff, but still very much in the mix if these guys start to go side by side at any point in time. And Whitehead, any of the Porsche drivers here have to be very calculated about how they make their moves, because you may have the advantage in one part of the lap trying to go side by side with those around you with that extra cornering performance, but if you don't manage to make it stick, you are immediately vulnerable, likely to the car behind that has gained in all of the side by side action. And if they're driving something that isn't the same as you, and it's something that's like a Honda or the Mercedes, you're in trouble. So you have to be very mindful of that when you are battling BMW as well. As we've seen Robin Schaefer almost immediately doing what I said he might be able to do in the early phase of the race, applying the pressure to the back of Whitehead, who goes from being the hunter to the hunted. And coming along in this little trio is Marco Bischoff as well. Robin Schaefer looking to recover those positions that he lost in the early stages of this race. And we'll go on board the BMW because he is gaining in the slipstream. I think Whitehead is going to have to surely go defensive on this run. And he's got a half move, but he hasn't got enough. And he's forced the door open, Schaefer, towards the second apex. And this is not what Whitehead needs. He's stuck on the outside line now. Bischoff and the Mercedes behind are going to get involved in this in a moment. Schaefer trying to go around the outside. Tricky stuff here. And almost contact. You've got to avoid that, Whitehead, if you want to maintain the championship. And he just about holds position. But this is scrapping that the British driver doesn't need. And I'll tell you what this has done. It's mean he's dropped the toe to George Boothby, and now that leaves him even more in danger of the likes of Schaefer, Bischoff, Jurkovic, Gerardis, Makowski. And other than Marco Bischoff, who seems to have some pretty good pace, those cars are all much faster in a straight line than the Porsche of Whitehead. Jardy, I think, made a position up to not too long ago over Schneckenberger. I think the Mercedes may have made a mistake on the exit of Dunlop Curve, exactly the same fashion. There's also white flag out for Kareckas, and Hutchinson will try to jump on board with that in just a moment when we can escape the replay. All seems to be okay, more or less, between those drivers. Mark Hazing has made some sort of move over Samir Fock. Flashing of the lights there from the Latvian driver, not happy about something, but a dive bomb down the inside from Mercedes, and just about manages to get it turned. And Samir obviously feeling that that was a rather late dive towards the inside. Mark Hazing would say it was justified. That was a little bit Kamui Kobayashi style. Obviously had some stellar overtakes in his Formula 1 days, I think around 2011 or 12, if I remember rightly. And now Robin Schaefer applying the pressure once more to Whitehead, and he is in a world of pain and pressure. This is not what you need when you're just looking for a calm and easy race and to try to bring your championship home after such a stellar season. And you look in the rearview mirrors and you've got drivers that just have nothing to lose, and they are mostly in cars that have greater straight line speed than you. Next run towards turn one there, he didn't defend the inside line. Now he does. He's more wary of it this time, and he's going to send the BMW towards that outside line. Bischoff having to defend the inside line a little bit as well, and wide for Schaefer, and a bit of breathing room for Whitehead there. He just needs to get a decent result finish. And Kareckas currently sitting in P2, not going to make life any easier. Side-by-side between Schneckenberger and Jardier again. So Mercedes immediately fighting back after that mistake. Fantastic side-by-side action between these two, and he's made it stick. Brilliant stuff there from the German driver in that number 16 car, and making it work over a driver that has so much experience and talent in that cockpit, and did a fantastic job to go toe-to-toe with one of the very best that we have in the Pro Series. Schaefer closing back up to the rear of Whitehead now. And I tell you what, Whitehead could even be in trouble once again towards Spoon Curve, and that's a tricky one to defend as well. Gets good acceleration out of the hairpin, but the BMW will start to gain fairly swiftly. But I think Whitehead, in actual fact, is going to be safe for now. But Schaefer can get close enough. He hasn't been able to size up too much of a move towards 130R, and that's a mistake though a little bit from Whitehead. He's wide on the entry, and that could be the mistake that gives Schaefer just enough of an overlap to give him a headache towards 130R there. Closing in the slipstream is the German driver. He's running out of track, he's running out of opportunity if he wants to send in. I think, will he back off? And he does. Here's the lift off the throttle there from the Beamer, and it will be perhaps another scrap by the time they get towards turn one. Bischoff, Jurkovic and Gerardis all still locked in this trainer right now. Your top five all separated fairly substantially. Boothby still applying the pressure to Hutchinson, but not enough to really worry the Ferrari driver too much at the moment. But right now, in terms of your championship fight, this is where it is all fundamentally taking place. It's whether or not Whitehead can hold on, whether or not Bischoff can hold on to that position. A little bit deep under brakes almost from the German driver, makes it stick. Meanwhile, Boothby, having just said that he wasn't applying the pressure to Hutchinson, somehow has made it stick. through the opening series of corners. So he gained a tremendous amount in the opening sector. So let's see what happened between these two. Surely it was a mistake from Hutchinson, because I can't imagine they would have been side by side in towards turn 1. Hutchinson hasn't dropped back very far since the overtake took place, and it is a wide moment. It's a big wobble there from the Ferrari, and just completely ends up having to give up the position there. So a rare mistake from the Canadian, who was your race winner at Indianapolis, now finds himself looking at the rear diffuser of the Veloce Esports Honda of George Boothby. And that Honda's not going to be easy to overtake whatsoever. Still all kicking off. Look at this train of cars. This is an absolute nightmare for Whitehead. Obviously, a lot of composure and talent inside the cockpit of that number 3 car. The man that's absolutely rocketed up the LFM standings in terms of licenses and ELO over the course of this season. But right now, has to try to collect himself and put together all of the racing tactics that he knows and everything that he has in the rule book, because once again Schaefer closing towards 130R, surely though not quite close enough to make anything happen just yet in the Porsche, then extends a car length towards the next turn. Actual fact, Bischoff now on the attack and almost into the rear diffuser of the BMW. And it's going to be another run and battle towards turn 1. That's where the BMW manages to just about get close enough. Gains in the slipstream down the back straight. Doesn't have quite enough towards Casio Triangle, but does have enough to really give the British driver a headache towards turn 1. And it's all the way towards the inside line. Brave stuff there. Whitehead has to be conscious, and he's gone wide. And Schaefer down the inside, and Whitehead drops a position. And immediately we'll have Marco Bischoff on his tail as well. And we know how much the wielding of power the Porsche driver has in that number 2 car. He has done magical things in that car for K. Kramer Racing Esports, and he'll be applying the pressure immediately to the back of Whitehead, who now is staring at the back of a BMW. And Schaefer now will be the question, can he escape from the Veloce car? But a mistake on the entry towards turn 1. Schaefer really forced the issue there, and Whitehead, with a championship to think about, had to open the door. And that's the thing, a lot of these drivers have nothing to lose, whereas Whitehead has everything to lose. Hutchinson does think about dive towards the inside at the hairpin, not quite. In actual fact, tags a little bit of grass on the entry there. Bischoff applying the pressure immediately to Whitehead. In actual fact, a little bit wide on the exit for the Veloce car. Jurkovic in this pack as well. And Schaefer will be towing along the Porsche Whitehead a little bit, but I tell you what, Bischoff is faster. Can he do anything towards Spoon Curve? Not quite yet. Biding his time. But he wants to get himself, he wants to put a car between himself and Jurkovic, because we've seen those two scrap time and time again, playing with the gears on the exit, and not an ideal line from Bischoff whatsoever. In actual fact, is now really going to come under pressure from Jurkovic, and that could give Whitehead, I think a little bit of contact there between those two. Maybe a little bit of network issue there, but Jurkovic down the inside line has the grunt, but a little bit of contact between those two. Bischoff all the way onto the AstroTurf. This is giving Whitehead the breathing space that he would have desperately been wanting. Bischoff holds on for the time being. Gerardis almost pushes around number 26 of Jurkovic, but that got a little bit feisty, and now Whitehead able to concentrate a bit more. Meanwhile, Michael Frey has his attention solely diverted to Mattia De Campo, going for the undercut on the exit. Samuel Ratz getting a great view of all this. We'll go on board the Ferrari as they make their way down. Atrafal got to cut towards turn 1 because Jurkovic has managed to get through on Bischoff. Now he goes off in sight of Whitehead. Michael Frey defending, attacking. He can't make up his mind, with Samuel Ratz applying the pressure behind and De Campo defending in front of him, but they stay as they were. But crucially then, Jurkovic now in front of Bischoff. Now the question is, can he close in on Luke Whitehead? Because if he can, that's a car that can make an overtake, and if he's right there in the slipstream, you can bet that the man that is number 26 car in this server is going to be leaving nothing on the table today, and he will be trying to make a move, and that could really make the British driver's day to close out this championship that bit more difficult. Hutchinson still very much locked on to the back of Boothby, as Kareckas still hunting around a second behind Walsingham. A smidge faster was the Lithuanian than your race leader last time round. If he does get into the race lead, that's another thing that to add to Luke Whitehead's headache. Bischoff trying to hang on to the back of Jurkovic then, but just watch that car. Watch that Mercedes just absolutely power away towards the top of the hill. And Whitehead Little by little, though, mistake from Jurkovic. Will hold on to the position, I think, just through pure horsepower on the run towards 130R. Just absolutely monsters its way away from the number 2 car. I think we'll have to be worrying about the 2 BMWs in the form of Gerardis and Makoski in not too long. A little bit delayed on the upshift there, actually, from the number 2 car. See how much the Porsche gains through 130R with its cornering capability, but by the time they then have the next run towards 130R, it's just, towards turn 1, the Mercedes in the hands of Jurkovic is really just going to be able to absolutely monster away. Look at it, it's just not even a contest between these 2 cars. In actual fact, Bischoff has got some company fast approaching in the form of the TF Racing BMW of Gerardis. Oh, that's a mistake from Bischoff there, and he drops a position to the BMW, and Makoski almost managing to sneak through and all that as well, and Bischoff, who we saw get unsettled in qualifying over one of the curves, very similar for the Porsche, different part of the circuit, of course, and again a twitch, and I think Makoski had to really slam on the anchors there for a moment not to make contact there. Thankfully, no incident taking place, but Gerardis has made his way through, and alongside Jurkovic, that's another couple of cars. If they do get to the back of Whitehead, we're very fast in a straight line and looking to make a move. And Bischoff, though, will just have to try to regather himself for now. Anderson applying the pressure to Makoski just behind. So, have to see how he ends up faring. And we'll get an idea of the relative pace of each of these guys that are just in a little bit of clear air now. Whitehead kind of just following in the slipstream of Schaefer. Jurkovic and Gerardis now likely of being more or less unleashed, having got past the likes of Bischoff, who will still be there or thereabouts, but I think with the slow straight line speed of that Porsche is not really going to be able to do much to affect the lap times of those cars. We'll have to see how each of those drivers get on. A few other battles further down the order that we'll try to keep an eye on, but there's so much going on and so much riding on these positions inside of the top 10 right now. It's difficult to pick one and pick the right one in all of that. Walsingham just entering the Casio triangle once more. George Boothby continuing to be under pressure from Hutchinson. Hutchinson has still got pace in that car, despite making the mistake a few laps ago. If he decides to go for that undercut strategy, the Ferrari, very good at maintaining its tyres. In actual fact, could go for the overcut strategy if he's feeling particularly brave, and is still firmly locked in this fight for the final podium position. How's it faring further down the order? Jurkovic, Gerardis, and Bischoff all far slower than Whitehead, and that's wide for Makoski, trying to go around the outside of the German driver in front of him, almost running off the road entirely. Oh, I thought he was going to send one down the inside there into turn 3, but unable to do so. But right now, as it stands, despite Whitehead dropping that position to Schaefer and things looking dicey for a moment, these cars behind in this little train from 7th to about 12th position, not lapping really on the same terms as those inside the top 6, who are all in the 59s at the moment, with Walsingham last time around being the fastest on tracks. That Mercedes still just under half an hour of this race into half an hour into this race, and he is still extracting good lap time out of that car. In actual fact, it is Whitehead and Hutchinson that are really applying the pressure inside the top 6 positions. And just having a little bit of a look at the chat there. And yeah, that's unfortunately not going to be something that I can answer, I'm afraid, Chuckwagon. So if there is anybody there's a Patreon in the chat that can help out a dear friend of the channel that has been very supportive for many a stream, that would be incredibly helpful, or any of the mods as well that may be able to help him out. But unfortunately, that is information that I do not have, and with the amount of chaos that we have going on in this race, I'm not sure even if I did have it, I'd be able to put it all together. I do just need to check with Hutchinson, who was almost pushing along Boothby there. He can't make it stick, and Makoski, who was doing the same to the likes of Bischoff, unable to reel in the Porsche any further. Yellow flag, and there's bubbling that's gone off, and a victim of 130R. I've had a complete meltdown on my screen. Excuse me, everybody, as I've just catapulted myself with the tabs Hopefully everything is still looking okay on the stream, because I do everything on a single monitor, and a little bit of a catastrophe at this end. So we'll go on board with the replay of bubbling then, see what happened to the number 20 car. Goes through 130R, drops it over the curb, and there you go. There's the that dreaded kind of ice curb again, striking a different part of the circuit this time around. Gets going once more, but losing a huge amount of positions in the process. We also do need to check back with Bischoff versus McCoskey, see if we can catch the tail end of what took place between those two, because they were having a scrap not too long ago, and I think it was all between them at the first couple of corners. But Bischoff once more able to hold off the hard-charging BMW behind. Hutchinson brought the white flag for a moment there, maybe a wide moment through the first or second Degner, tighter line through the hairpin, but again, Ferrari just not able to utilise its cornering performance against that Honda straight line speed that absolutely powers its way up the hill. Same story for Whitehead in this Porsche. Meanwhile, we've got Samuel Ratz versus Michael Frey. It's been a busy tussle between these three, including Benny Vitter down in this part of the circuit as well. We'll go on board with Vitter as he watches this all unfold. Michael Frey into 19th position for the time being. Samuel Ratz maybe gaining though up towards Spoon Curve, but can't send one down the inside. And a little bit of a wiggle, in actual fact, maybe an opportunity now for Benny Vitter, but he can't put one together. In actual fact, it's in the background. It's Dom Healy versus Christopher Hoffman that end up swapping positions on the run into Spoon Curve. The replay just taking a moment to come together. Then you see wide for Hoffman on the entry into the corner. And the Wild Things Racing Aston Martin able to go through. White flag out briefly for Jurkovic. Maybe a wide moment through 130R. Nothing too dramatic though. Looking at the lap times. So last time round, Walsingham again, only driver in the 59s, as Bischoff now defending hard from the BMW just behind. And he's had to pull that move a few times over and still manages to keep the number 23 car in that P10 spot. And the German driver, the reigning two-time Pro Series champion, holding on to P9 for the time being. Benny Vitter applying the pressure further down the order, if I can actually find him on my leaderboard, to the back of Samuel Ratz, but unable to do anything himself. Someone that can, though, is Eric Conrad, his teammate. I think to swap positions with Louis Vubbling and makes another mistake. Now on the run in towards turn 2, and the Porsche just not looking particularly stable or happy today for the number 20 car that's been so fast on other occasions, and he ends up dropping down to 26th position. Meanwhile, at the front of the pack, Walsingham then still leads by 2.2 seconds over Kareckas, extending his advantage by half a second last time around, although I think it was a little bit of a scruffy effort from the number 1 car, currently sitting in P2. It's where he sits in the championship standings as well, and if things were to finish as they are, whilst I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, as it is of course quite a complicated point scoring system, based on my rough estimates, I do not believe that would be enough to swing it in favour of the Lithuanian, and he would stay P2 in the championship. Whitehead still, I think, doing enough in P6, having dropped that position to Schaefer rather unenviably. Last time around, pretty even pace between Schaefer, Whitehead, Jurkovic, Gerardis and Bischoff, although Bischoff and McCoskey slowed themselves up a little bit. White flag for Gerardis there, maybe a bit of a wide moment through 130R. Marquezing bring out the white flag as well. It was for drivers, and that's another element. They've got to be aware of track limits. Drive-throughs are definitely something that can be in effect around here if you really do play about too much with the track limits, and on the exit 130R certainly is one of those areas of the circuit. Marquezing in this little group between Schneckenberger and Jardier, who I think Mercedes driver may have been able to get past Jardier not too long ago. I've also realised amongst all of this chaos in my usual fashion, I've completely forgotten to look at the stewards' inquiries, and there have been a couple of penalties that have been dished on out. So the number 22 car, that is the BMW of Christopher Hoffman, gets a 5-second penalty for forcing another car off the track. I don't think we quite saw that. And a penalty for the number 12, that is in the hands of... Whereabouts is the number 12 car? As I'm desperately trying to look up and down my timing sheets. Unless I am being blind, I can't see a number 12. they ended up with getting a 15-second penalty for causing a collision. So whether or not that was something that led to them retiring from the race, and hence why they are no longer on my timing sheets, I'm starting to think that may be the case. A little bit of a shame there for whatever happened with that. And it is no further action for all of the other incidents that have been looked into so far this race, which is a good opportunity also now to say a big thank you to all of the stewards' hard work this season. This is the first season we've had in the Case King Pro Series with live stewarding in the top split, and they put in a phenomenal amount of effort and really have transformed the experience that we have been witnessing all season long. Marquez trying to hunt down Schneckenberger in front with the battle between two Mercedes. Tell you what though, someone else that is in trouble once again, Gerardis. The straight line speed of the Porsche of Bischoff seems to be pretty handy. A little bit of flashing of the lights there, clearly not happy about something. Imagine that the K. Kramer Racing esports car would have gained through 130R, so maybe on the entry towards Casio Triangle, but he's compromised his line, and now it's Makoski trying to go around the outside. Oh, and he's made it stick, I think. Sweeps around the outside. That was Kimi Räikkönen versus Fisichella all again, all those years ago. And Makoski finally makes a move. Bischoff obviously not happy about something that took place. Whether or not anything appears on the steward's inquiries, we'll have to wait and see, but the repercussions of it were severe, and another BMW makes its way further up into the order. And I said it'd be a good platform for the longer kind of phase of this race, and it's proving to be exactly that. Looking at the lap times last time around, Walsingham, Kareckas, both pretty even on a 2-minute point 3. Boothby and Hutchinson were your fastest drivers on circuit, almost a 2-minute dead. The pair of them almost into the 1:59s, which is extremely impressive over 30 minutes into this race. And then, crucially, for the likes of Whitehead, little touch between Makoski and Bischoff in the middle of the hairpin there. But thankfully, no harm done. But crucially for Whitehead, half-second faster than Jurkovic, 1.1 second faster than Gerardis, and all this scrapping further down is just allowing him to put more breathing space between himself and Kareckas, and Kareckas not making any inroads, particularly to Walsingham. I think surely he'll have to go for an undercut strategy here to make it work. It'll be interesting to see what choices they make. The undercut, I don't imagine. It's difficult to tell. The undercut may not be the strongest for the Mercedes because it is very sketchy on cold tyres. But if those tyres are allowed to get up to temperature, then that's going to be a very big performance gain for that car that has led this race since he started. Almost had a 3-second lead over the number 1 car that, again, is on such a stellar performance and pace in this top split. But right now, chances of not just a championship win, but just a maiden victory in the Pro Series looking ever less likely, and something's happened down here. We'll try to catch on board with all of it in a moment, because Bischoff and Anderson now side by side through in towards turn 1, and the German driver able to hold back the South African. It's all kicking off further down the orders. I'm not sure if we'll be able to jump back to what took place, because it's almost 2 by 2 towards turn 1. Dom Healy on the inside line towards Benny Vitter now. Wild Things versus Yeet Esports in towards turn 2. Wide for the BMW. Jan Drexler and Hoffman having a little scrap of their own just behind all this as well, bubbling the first driver into the pits. So maybe for a drive-through penalty, because the pit window has not opened. There is a central pit stop window in this race, and something's happened to Schneckenberger further up the order there, and I think it's going to be the exit of Dunlop curve again, is it? We saw him make the mistake earlier on, and that's allowed Marquezing, Jardier and Samir to all follow on through, and he drops down to P16. Disappointment there for the number 16 car that now finds himself in that very exact spot. Gaps further up the field, not particularly changing. Whitehead dropping back actually a bit on this lap. Gap now almost up to a second between himself and Robin Schaefer, so maybe a little bit of a difficult lap for the championship leader, but still nothing too much to worry about. 4 seconds to himself in the next car. Dom Healy and Vitter continuing to battle. We'll go on board with Jan Drexler as he watches these two scrap on the run up towards Spoon Curve. The Aston Martin with the advantage, fast in a straight line is that car. The torque will be more in favour of the BMW, although once the Aston Martin gets going, it really gets going, and that's actually one of the reasons why it's so quick at Imola. As we saw, I think it was a Frenchman, I forget his name, I think it was Axel, put it on the front row at Imola, and that's one of the reasons why the Aston is so quick around there. as well as a few other characteristics. Drexler gaining in the slipstream towards 130R. Can't do anything though. A little bit wide from Bitter in front, but I think they'll all stay the same as they were. One thing that may change though is Addison versus Bischoff, and Bischoff not choosing to defend that inside line this time around, and the South African able to go down in towards turn 1. Schneckenberger on the return attack there after the mistakes, and another little scrappy entry towards turn 1. It's all kicking off between these two, almost making a move, but he can't make it stick. And Marquezing has got past Chris Sang and all that as well. The BMW, the driver from Hong Kong, went wide on the exit of turn 2 there, and the number 21 car that has been continuing to gain positions through the field, and that very striking Papega Racing Team car. As we'll stay having a look at that for just a few moments. Very nice shades of purple and blue. Having put together a couple of very basic liveries here on ACC myself, I commend all of those that put together these absolutely fantastic liveries that we have in the Pro Series, and we'll just give that a bit of a close-up. Look at that, almost fluorescent as we went underneath the bridge then. But very nice livery for the German driver, and doing very nicely in this race as well. And as the engineer came over the radio, it is pit window time open. So whether or not we will see drivers starting to go for that undercut, we'll have to wait and see. Biggest movers in the field, George Boothby gaining 2 positions after qualifying in P5, and Marquezing, the man we're looking at right now, having gained 4 positions, as well as Michael Frey, Dom Healy, Hoffman technically alongside Melansky, your biggest movers further down the order with 5 positions gained apiece. But now with the pit window open, will we see any of our front drivers in this pack going for something? We won't, but we may see Jardier trying to make a move. He got very close to the back of the BMW then, but had to back off because 130R, it's a tricky enough corner to make work at the best of times. We've gone on board with the Czech driver Bischoff in towards the pits. So there we have it, the first driver that is blinking with the pit stop window goes into the pits, and so is Samir, who was just behind the man that we are on board with at the moment, his Yassi teammate. So we'll have to see whether or not that ends up being of benefit, because it is very early on, 10 minutes ahead more or less of the midway point of this race. And of course you'll get fresh tyres now and you'll have a very powerful undercut, but whether or not that will come back to bite you later on, we'll have to wait and see. But for those that may be struggling to get past cars in front and feel like they have the overall pace to be able to carry that undercut strategy off when they've got those weaker tyres later on, is the strategy that some of those will be looking to go down. But I'm very interested to see how it plays out for some of the Mercedes cars that do take a little bit longer to fire up their tyres and also just ultimately extract pace around here at Suzuka on the opening flying laps. Walsingham did a great job in the opening part of this race, but Kareckas was visibly closer in those early stages. And once the momentum got going for the Mercedes, he didn't look back. So as we make our way towards the midpoint, crucial stuff happening in terms of strategy. Also, Whitehead now dropping back to about second to Schaefer. Jurkovic gaining a little bit last time around. Whether or not we'll see an undercut coming from him, try to close that gap towards Whitehead, we'll have to wait and see. And Mikoski applying the pressure out of tail end of the top 10 to the fellow BMW driver of Manos Gerardis. But a few scraps taking place amongst the top 10 and 15 positions. Just have a little bit of a look at the chat. And yes, someone pointing out about stability of the Porsche 130. Yeah, 130. I'm kind of eating my words there, unfortunately, for Louis Bubbling. I do apologise. A commentator curse, it was said quite in advance. The Mercedes, I did say, wasn't the most stable, having some issues there in the hands of Schneckenberger, going very wide and now maybe under some extra pressure as Mikoski, Addison, Sang all starts coming to the pits, and so does Schneckenberger. So we won't see that fight taking place. Maybe looking to do that, trying to avoid any unnecessary scrapping, gets a fresh set of boots on that car, and then try to see what he can do in terms of reeling in those that are in front. Hutchinson having dropped back for a while, starting to regain some time. In actual fact, the pair of these two, of Boothby and Hutchinson, have been closing in bit by bit on Grantas Kareckas. So the man that really needs to be challenging for the lead of this race, starting to fall into the clutches for the tail end of the podium positions, where it could very quickly, depending on how the pit stops go and how they play their cards in terms of strategy, could very easily have a three-way fight and making Kareckas' hopes of a championship win that bit more tricky and difficult. Samuel Ratz further down the order as well, applying the pressure to Michael Frey in the number 28 Porsche, but nothing that the German driver can do as of yet. And yeah, absolutely, these guys in the top split are just absolute weapons behind the wheel. They, obviously we've got... Oh, that's a dive down the inside and contact between Ratz and Michael Frey. The Porsche went a little bit wide on the entry there, and it was all tears for the Porsche by the time they made their way to the exit. We'll go on board with the Ferrari, see how it all took place. It went through the first and second Degner, and it was a bit of a slide from the Porsche there, but fairly all okay. And then by the time they got to the hairpin there, just catches the grass on the entry. Ratz senses the opportunity, but the door closes, and then unfortunately the Porsche sent into a bit of disarray further down the order. Dissy got very close between Frey and Conrad, which is still kicking off at the moment. Crucially also Hutchinson, Schaefer, Jurkovic, Gerardis, Marquezing all now into the pits as well, but Walsingham, Kareckas all staying out alongside Boothby and Jardier and Luke Whitehead. So the strategy is still playing out in the top part of the grid, and Eric Conrad will join those that have made their way into the pits. Obviously it'll be crucial time to see if anyone has just made that subtle misjudgment that can be oh so detrimental to your race. If you have that bit of a slip up, speed in the pits and get yourself a stop and go 30-second penalty. There's two risks around this circuit because it's a little bit of a tricky pit lane entry, and combine that with concerns as Chris Sang actually, I think, maybe about to make a move towards 130R over Marco Bischoff. Nothing that the German driver can do, and the number 9 BMW says thank you very much, laughs and giggles in BMW top speed glory, and gets himself ahead of the other German outfit. Hutchinson just emerging out of the pits. He is in some clean air just behind Samir Fock versus Schneckenberger is starting to take place. And you would have to think, in actual fact, though, these two were pretty much toe-to-toe on circuit before the pit stop, so it is fairly even on pace. Look at that Mercedes, though. There is just nothing that you can do against that car. Just checking in on Jurkovic. I think actually just the white flag maybe in response to emerging from the pits, and same for Eric Conrad and Marco Bischoff. Marco Bischoff is in the pits again. Did he have a drive-through penalty? Did the reigning two-time Pro Series champion, someone could confirm that in the chat, that'd be greatly appreciated. And yeah, I am right. That is just unfortunately, I think, sums up Bischoff's season. He's been so good. He has 2 victories this season, but the consistency just has not been there for the German driver. And unfortunately, Suzuka playing havoc for him once again, and getting a drive-through penalty, and that has dropped him really out of contention now. He might gain a few positions back when some of those other drivers come into the pits, but down in 28th position for the time being. Chris Tang not able to do anything about the roaring pace of Marcus Marquezing in that Mercedes, just absolutely blasts away like a rocket ship up to the top of Spoon Curve. Both the Mercedes at Suzuka and Bathurst are forces to be reckoned with. Definitely, I think, the favourite tracks of those two cars. Used to be pretty good around Massano as well, if I remember correctly, but ultimately not the strongest car around there anymore, I don't believe. Looking further up the order, as that's a wiggle for Marquezing, making an opportunity for Chris Tang, who doesn't waste any time sending one down the inside. As I try to find a camera to catch that glorious send, but it's not going to be good enough for the time being to make a move. And I think with the Mercedes grunt and power, that they will stay as they were. Meanwhile, out front, Walsingham, Kareckas, Hutchinson, Schaefer, Whitehead have all emerged out of the pits exactly as they were. Whitehead's lost a little bit of time in the pits to Schaefer, but crucially has actually gained time over Jurkovic, now 5 seconds behind in the number 26 Mercedes. So a bit of an extra cushion for the British driver. And Kareckas not really gaining on Walsingham in that whatsoever. So we'll see what happens in the second half of this race. Michael Frey just emerging out of the pits and losing a couple of positions in the process. And he will now set off in charge of Kay Zeisler in the number 31 Aston Martin up ahead of him. Tell you what though, Hutchinson glued to the back of Grantas Kareckas, but bearing in mind, it was George Boothby that was right ahead of Hutchinson and was really starting to apply the pressure not too long ago to Grantas Kareckas, his Veloce Esports teammate. Now, the question is, does George Boothby come into the pits? Nope, is the answer. He is all the way around in yeses. So, 2:03 last lap for Boothby. I think Hutchinson, this will be a flying lap for him. And I'll tell you what, Hutchinson really on the attack now for Grantas Kareckas. This is not what Kareckas needed. He was falling into the clutches before, and the chances of taking a maiden race victory and a last-minute snatch of the Pro Series Championship looking ever less likely because the pressure from the Canadian driver goes a little bit wide on the exit of turn 18. But last lap from Hutchinson then, let's see what he was able to do. Oh, it was a 59.8 from Hutchinson there, and that's in a little bit of dirt yet with Kareckas as well. George Boothby, half a second slower, and I'll tell you what, the margins between those two really was not very big, so if Boothby isn't careful, he could end up finding himself between both these drivers, but maybe he's just going for the overcut. Maybe he's decided that the overcut strategy is ultimately going to be more beneficial. It might be counting, in fact, on these two scrapping. Kareckas holding up the Ferrari, not allowing him to execute the pace that he has on board the Italian car for the time being. And then George Boothby in that number 5 Honda that can then execute a stellar stint at the end of the race. Maybe try to use that extra tyre advantage that he will inevitably have if he stays out for a while to try to fight back against these two and make his way into what will be effective P2 in this race. We'll have to keep an eye on what Walsingham is able to do once he gets some fresh tyres on board. We'll give a bit of coverage to your effective race leader as well, who's been doing a stellar, measured and controlled race so far and has just under half of this race left to go with 43 minutes on the clock. Still has the fastest lap of the race on a 59.7. Hutchinson right now, the driver that's really trying to push the agenda to change that at the moment, but I think this will be the first flying lap from Walsingham, so expect that to be utterly smashed. Tempest, De Campo, Jardier and Benny Vitter all coming into the pits, and I think the only drivers having stayed out for the time being are your current race leader, George Boothby, and also Jonathan Clifford in the number 30 Lamborghini. So they are seemingly very much going for that overcut strategy. What's it going to be for Walsingham? No points associated with fastest lap, but definitely pride and honours. And it's a 59.0. Absolutely rapid stuff from the Brit that's been leading since the very beginning. And that is 6/10 clear of what Kareckas and Hutchinson can achieve. I do expect that advantage to diminish somewhat as they make their way through the stint. But Walsingham right now, at least when it's in the early phase of the race and those tyres do get up to temperature, he is absolutely at home with that Mercedes right now. Has been very consistent time and time again. Jardier coming out just ahead of his Yassi teammate of Samir Fock as they battle for P14. Schneckenberger coming out a little bit ahead of that group as well and able to hold on to 13th position. Closest battles on circuit then between Hutchinson and Kareckas. Makowski versus Jurkovic now, who definitely not looking to make any inroads on Luke Whitehead at the moment, just trying to hold on to position from the hard-charging pole in that... I've lost him on my screen. Number 23 car, currently sitting in P9 then. And also further down the order, another battle that has been closing in somewhat over the last couple of laps is Michael Frey versus Kay Zeisler between the Porsche and the Aston Martin. We saw Michael drop a little bit down the order. I think ultimately he doesn't have the better pace, 0.4 of a second faster on the last lap versus the Aston Martin, which is no slouch in a straight line. It's certainly going to be making the Swisses evening a little bit more tricky. No changes in weather by the looks of it on the horizon for today, so it looks like we'll have stable dry running until the end, unless we have a last minute 10-minute shower at the closing stages of the race, but at least provisionally it will be dry till the very end. And the sort of slightly selfish part in me as a spectator as well as a commentator almost wants to see the rain come down, because that would just really add all the sort of drama and be so fitting for what we have seen time and time again in the Pro Series, for just action-packed stuff every time. And there you go, George Boothby has dropped behind these two then, so Kareckas still retaining P2, Hutchinson going back into P3, and Boothby dropping to P4, but he has got those fresher tyres, I think, by about 2 or 3 laps. So whether or not that ends up being the right call for him in the end, we'll have to wait and see. Nice to see some support for drivers in the chat. Do cheer them on. And also, when we get to the end of this race, if you are rather close to those that have been participating in tonight's race, do not feel afraid to give them a little poke and see if they'll join us for an interview. That'll be very exciting to do that. Chris Tang, something has happened to the driver from Hong Kong in that number 9 BMW, and he has retired from the race, so that's very unfortunate for him. Was on for a pretty good result, and there we go, drops out of the server. So not what he would have wanted. Jonathan Clifford just emerging out of the pits in the number 30 Lamborghini and sets off trying to hunt down the BMW of Siggy Lentis in the Yeet Sports car in front of him. Meanwhile, go on board with Michael Frey versus Kay Zeisler. The Porsche still applying the pressure to the rear wing of that Aston Martin, but just hasn't been able to find a way through. Maybe an opportunity here. Oh, that's awkward. Into the second deck. Now, in actual fact, may have been worth just waiting a little bit and being a tad more patient to try and launch an attack in towards turn 11 then. We'll close in under braking. Let's see what the Aston is like up the hill. We know it's going to be pretty decent. Acceleration initially in favour of the Porsche, but once the Aston gets going, it's pretty darn quick. We saw the Mercedes achieving something monstrous. I think Walsingham got up to 239 earlier on, and the Aston Martin 236. Imagine BMW there, and able to extend the advantage over the Porsche of Frey just behind, and that is what's keeping the number 28 car at bay for now. See though, very close into the slipstream on the run towards 130R. I do actually just need to quickly check with Schneckenberger versus Jardier though, because this has been a battle that's been heating up. They've had some side-by-side action already. Jardier looking to the left as he think about looking to the right towards turn 1. He can't quite get alongside, and the Mercedes will hold on. That straight line speed is just monstrous between those two cars. And in actual fact, losing a little bit of a tail end of that sector from the number 28 car. And they've got a hard-charging Marco Bischoff that is looming in the background in that very recognisable K. Kramer Racing Esports car that we have seen take the top step of the podium time and time again, twice in this championship. Took the win at the season opener, and then also at round 5, to which I fantastically forget where we were at for round 5 of this championship. That was Kyle Army in what was a very dramatic and busy race there, but just in terms of the overall championship, it has just not been what he would have wanted. He hasn't been able to put together the series of races that we've gotten rather used to, and I'm sure he has to some extent as well over the last couple of seasons. And it will certainly be a new victor in the Pro Series by the end of today. Michael Frey continuing to sustain the pressure on to Zeisel now. Does he think about a dive towards the inside line? We saw Marquezing pull that one off on Samir early on, although much to Samir's displeasure. And flashing the lights there from Michael Frey. Not sure I saw anything too untoward in all of that. Continuing to flash the lights there. Maybe just get a little bit frustrated and feeling like he has the pace and going for normal GT3 tactics of distracting those in front of you. As Bischoff gained half a second on that last lap. So he'll be looking to add a third car and a second Porsche to his party. Continuing to flash the lights now is the number 28 Swiss driver, and I think that is purely for distraction purposes, as nothing has happened over the last few corners. He'll gain in this next part of the circuit, carrying the momentum towards the Casio triangle, dive towards the inside from the 28, and there's contact on the entry. I felt that that was inevitable, and he will then try to go for a cutback on the exit, switches then for another cutback on the exit of turn 18, but the Aston Martin is then going to immediately have the advantage with the straight line speed and the power towards turn 1, and he manages to get back ahead, indicating towards one side and then the other, and not often something that you see when you're battling side by side, but the Aston Martin giving an indication of kind of a thing where more or less is looking to go on circuit, but reclaim that position very swiftly. Jardier glued to the back once more of the Mercedes of Schneckenberger, but unable to make anything stick for the time being. Hutchinson still applying the pressure to Kareckas, and I'll tell you what, someone that's motoring along at the moment, George Boothby, 59.2, his fastest lap of the race, and faster than those in front of him by about 3 to 4 tenths of a second respectively, other than Walsingham, who continues to extend his lead at the front of this grid. But those tyres coming into effect, and it'll all be about whether or not he can find an opportunity to execute a manoeuvre. It's difficult when you've got another car so close to the one that you're trying to overtake in front of you, and that's exactly the scenario that he has with the likes of Hutchinson and Kareckas. He may just bide his time for a while, try to see if he can capitalise on a bit of a scrap, and then sneak his way through at a later point in time. Pit window has now closed, but everyone has already made their stop, so nothing else to see with all of that. You see Bischoff closing in further to what will shortly become a three-way tussle almost immediately, I think, because big shunt on the exit of Spoon Curve there, and I'm sure Zeisler and the stewards may have something to say about that. Frey is going to be under a little bit of pressure, I think, from Bischoff by the time they get towards the Casio triangle. Bischoff, similar cars between these two, and I imagine Bischoff is going to be very racy under brakes. Will he go for a dive, or will he bide his time to stay a little bit longer? And the answer is the latter. He will just wait, but there may be a penalty dished out for that one. I'm sure stewards will be on to it in just a short moment. We'll catch up with their review and outcome of all of that, but I imagine that Michael Frey, having gained that position, maybe losing it very shortly, with Bischoff gaining in the slipstream, maybe about to happen immediately towards turn 1. Not quite, unless he can sneak one up the inside of turn 2, and I think he's going to do exactly that. So that's a mistake there for Michael Frey, side by side on the exit between the two Porsches, now into the S's. Brave stuff around the outside there. We saw this sort of battle between Schneckenberger and Jardier earlier on, and Bischoff manages to get the job done and makes his way in towards 23rd position. Fantastic racing between those two, and ultimately the confidence, the pace, the performance in that number 2 car able to come out on top and make that one stick, although big run for a moment from Michael Frey, who I thought was going to launch one down the inside of the first deck, that didn't quite make it stick. And I think Bischoff, as he keeps everything tied in together, what has happened between Hutchinson and George Boothby? We'll go back on the replay, we'll see if we can catch it. I don't know how long ago it was. Here it is. So George Boothby absolutely on the charge then, and Hutchinson just goes wide. Another mistake from the Ferrari driver. I don't think I saw any contact on the entry. A little bit of door banging between those two through Spoon Curve, and that allows Boothby to go through, and now sets off in sight of Grantas Kareckas. And Boothby, with the undercut strategy, is really making it work at the moment. Also, by the looks of it, no further action for both the contact that you just saw there between Hutchinson and George Boothby, as well as that between Frey and Kay Zeisler. So obviously better viewing angles for the stewards to influence that decision. Sammy Falk now under pressure from Sean Tempest, trying to go around the outside. That's a tricky one to make stick. Side-by-side action still between those two. Not an inch given, but barely a hair's width is enough to keep it all clean through the opening couple of turns, and they live to fight another day. Jardier has been making inroads towards Schneckenberger to reignite that scrap once again. Walsingham also continuing to pull away out front. 59.3 last time around. He has been so consistent today at the front of the field. Almost 6 seconds now is the gap to Kareckas, and that may open up even more if Kareckas does start to scrap with George Boothby, and certainly making things fall that bit more in favour of Luke Whitehead, who hasn't had the strongest outing so far today, but has just been doing enough to keep everything together for his championship hopes. And yeah, just obviously, everyone having their own opinions in the chat is difficult to see. Obviously, you kind of only have one camera angle from that. It was deemed, by the looks of it, from the stewards to be a no further action inquiry. So, we kind of had a bit of an external shot, and whether kind of the Aston left enough room or if there was a bit too much of a turn in, a bit deep on the brakes from one or the other, is tricky sometimes to tell from our external angles. George Boothby was within half a second a moment ago of Kareckas. I do think, though, there's going to be a wide moment for him. Maybe not, that was just a leaderboard getting a bit on the confused side, but I tell you what, he has absolutely raced up to the back of Kareckas. In actual fact, he's trying to make a move on his teammate already towards the first turn. So this undercut strategy has been overcut, excuse me, has been extraordinarily powerful for the number 5 car, a man that has won many a race in the Pro Series. This has been his most contested championship so far, and he's been right up there at the top of the standings throughout the entire season, but a couple of no-shows haven't helped his main championship hopes. I'll tell you what though, Sean Tempest versus Sammy Fogg, almost identical battle to what we saw a lap ago. And this time, even cleaner between those two, as Sammy edges out the BMW on the exit of the second turn and is able to hold on to P14. Boothby, though, really applying the pressure to his teammate Hutchinson. Not able to respond in all of this, but the pace that Boothby has had in this latter stage of the race, lapping just as fast as Walsingham, and that's not even in clean air. We'll have to see if he does manage to dispatch of Kareckas, which I really think may be the nail in the coffin for the Lithuanians' hopes of taking a championship here today. And it may be about to happen as far as soon as Spoon Curve, because the British driver looking, and defensive action from Kareckas there. Can Boothby sneak up the inside? We get a flash of the flame from the wonderful flat 6 in the back of this Porsche we're on board with. But George Boothby in that number 5 car, it's so powerful in a straight line. It's not quite Mercedes material around here, but it's as good as when you are facing against the Porsche. And he's going to the inside line. A little bit of a lift then for Boothby. These two are teammates after all. Whilst Boothby is racing for himself, whilst he wants to try to drop Kareckas down positions to see if he can make his way into P2 in the championship. Remember, prizes on the line for the top 3, and big ones at that. There will definitely be some very much a sense of racing respect between these two, but here comes Kareckas trying to defend that position from Boothby once more, down towards start, finish straight, but wise at driving on board the number 1 car, and he's able to maintain position for the time being. And that Honda of Boothby, immediately once it's got stuck behind Kareckas, the lap times have dropped by about a second relative to Walsingham. So what's taken place there between Schneckenberger and Juddy? I think that's the leaderboard getting a little bit trigger happy, but almost a swapping of positions between those two, but nothing happening as of yet. And Sean Tempest a little bit further back this time around, wasn't able to quite challenge Samir in the number 7 Ferrari towards turn 1. But still in hot pursuit and locked onto the gearbox of those cars, much like the Honda that we go on board with right now as the lights illuminate this Japanese tarmac. No rain will be present in the remainder of this race, so this is just out and out fight until the end. And with the tyre advantage that Boothby has, the straight line speed advantage that he has, it does almost feel inevitable at this rate that he will make his way past his Veloce teammate. Looks to the inside once again, but isn't going to be aggressive enough to make a move. But he won't hang back from that sort of move for too long. He'll give it a few laps. You know, George Boothby, he's won many a race from many a compromised position. 27.5 minutes left to go on the clock, so still plenty of time. About 13 laps left to go. It's going to be 14, I think, in this race. Boothby gaining again in the slipstream and backs out of the throttle, and you hear the difference there. Big lift for Boothby, flashed out for Kareckas through 130R then. This is the closest he has been in a long time. I'll tell you what though, Jardier has made the move through a Spoon Curve there, so he's made that one stick. It could be immediately a fight though, back towards 130R. This is going to get busy on the viewing screen, I can imagine. Side-by-side action there between those two, but Jardier does seem to have made that one stick. Meanwhile, Boothby versus Kareckas towards turn 1, then they go. And it's the same identical sort of battle that we saw just a few moments ago. and Kareckas still maintaining position. Gerardis trying to make something happen over Luke Addison. Will the South African defend the inside towards turn 1? He doesn't need to. Not quite enough of a gain from the Greek driver at the end towards the first turn. And in that fight further down, Samet still able to hold position over Sean Tempest. These two have been glued together for quite a while. Same goes for Jadier and Schneckenberger, who got that move done down the inside at Spoon Curve and powers away, and now looks to try to self in charge of Marcus Marquezing, who I think these two had a little bit of a scrap earlier on, so I have to see whether or not with the number 4 car now unleashed, what sort of pace he is able to get out of that car. Tell you what, all the scrapping between Kareckas and Boothby's allowed Hutchinson, who was initially dropping back, to start to make his way back into this fight as well. Quiet times for the championship leader in P6. 4 seconds to Schaefer in front, 4.5 seconds to Jurkovic behind. Defensive line from Kareckas towards Spoon Curve once again. And this feels like the closest that Boothby has been in a very long time. And could we see a daring move towards 130? Kareckas already trying to break the toe towards that inside line. And here comes a Honda, and this time I don't think it's going to be quite so friendly. White flag out for Walsingham. Hopefully there's nothing too severe. And George Boothby all the way around the outside. Mega brave stuff. Goes a little bit off the track. Hutchinson involved in this one. It's almost 3 wide towards the Casio triangle. Kareckas trying to fight back on the exit of the chicane now. And he is side by side. He's kept his foot planted in contact there. And how has that happened? George Boothby's lost 2 positions in one and ends up in front of Kareckas again. Hutchinson says thank you very much, and here comes Robin Schaefer now, trying to make his way up onto the podium. The Veloce Esports teammates, a little bit of bumping and shuffling between the pair of them. Schaefer goes through. Kareckas maybe about to lose another one, and surely that is absolutely it, although he's sending one up the inside of the BMW driver, desperately trying to fight back as quick as possible through turn 2, and he might have just about made a stick, and that's contact, and Kareckas is into the grass and into the gravel, and right behind him on your screen is Luke Whitehead, and if they finish like that, there is undoubtedly no chance for Kareckas to take the championship. We'll have to see if the stewards dish out any penalties, because that got very busy very quickly. It all kicked off between, I think it was the two Veloce guys slowing up, and what's gone on here, I think Hutchinson may have just backed off the throttle and given the position to George Boothby. No, it was a mistake. So he hasn't done it voluntarily. So after all of that for the Canadian, George Boothby somehow finds his way back in towards second place. He's been up and down the positions like a yo-yo in all of that. But you find George Boothby then in P2. 10.5 seconds now behind Walsingham, who's wondering what on earth is going on further down the order, and continuing to lap in the 59s. Incredibly impressive stuff from your race leader. Hutchinson just behind. I think Hutchinson may have been the catalyst in all of that, because the two Veloce guys were side by side, and it was all neat and tidy between those two. Kareckas did a fantastic job to keep himself in the scrap on the exit there. Hutchinson trying to carry the momentum, and I think there was a small touch between himself and George Boothby. It was very difficult to tell in the camera angles that played out, and I think that sent Boothby a little bit offline. He tagged Kareckas, split the pair of them. The seas parted in front of Hutchinson, who went through, and then a few corners later ended up ditching it on the exit of Dunlop Curve, and then dropped back towards P3. So absolute madness in the Pro Series, as always. It's what we've got used to in every season that we've had, and when you've got a circuit like Suzuka that pushes the drivers to their absolute limits, we would expect nothing less. And after all of that, Whitehead, who has just been... I don't mean to be... this is not a criticism, of course, to the number 3 car, the championship leader, by any means, but relative to sort of what we've expected to see, he's just set such a high bar for himself that kind of being in a bit of no man's land in P6 is just far and away from what we usually expected. But in all the chaos that's taken place, he's now only about 4 seconds away from a podium. So Whitehead, in all of this, depending on how his tyres are feeling, the damage on Kareckas' car, and whether or not those tyres have taken any extra wear, which they may well have done, that could certainly play into the hands of Whitehead. But I tell you what, if those two start to scrap, the disastrous play, and I almost didn't even mention it, if Whitehead is sent off in an instant between those two drivers and Kareckas carries on, I think that could then start to swing back in favour of Kareckas, but I think he would need to be further up the order than P5. He needs quite the points haul from today, and I think even with a DNF from Whitehead, that it would be unlikely that P5 finish for the number 1 car that would end up swinging into favour of the Lithuanian, and would still end up going the way of the British driver. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't see any more shenanigans between the Veloce esports cars. There's a few of them in this championship on the circuit this evening. It's got busy between the pair of them, a couple of them already. I'll tell you what, George Boothby immediately back on the pace after all of that scrapping. Has managed to take half a second out of Walsingham. It may be a bit too little too late, but now overcut strategy, preserving those tyres relative to the Mercedes that will have been eating through those substantially, doesn't seem to have lost too much in the form of pace. I'm also seeing some no further action, I think actually there may have been the last inquiry, excuse me, between Boothby and Hutchinson, so we'll see if the stewards look to investigate any of that, but it was a pretty messy sequence of events, so that may well end up resulting in no further action. Three-way tussle, though, now emerging for P13, led by Schneckenberger, who has dropped away from Jolly over the last few laps, and I think the BMW of Sean Tempest has been applying the pressure to Samir over the last few laps. Now tries to go up towards the inside of turn one. Not quite enough of an overlap, but a mistake from Samir, who's gone very wide, and he does very much in keeping deja vu style drift around the Japanese circuit, but unfortunately in the process drops to P15, and eventually the pressure from Tempest and the straight line speed of the BMW is enough to offset Samir and cause him to drop a position. And the investigation does look like it may have already taken place for that incident that we saw between the two Veloce cars and Hutchinson, and it is no further action. The 22 and 28 cars are also under investigation. They belong to... who do they belong to in the server? That is Frey and Hoffman, as well as also... a further incident as well between Kareckas and Schaefer was looked into, but no further action all round. So all things as they were, and I don't think too much to play with in terms of penalties in this race, which is always the way that we would rather things. But I tell you what, Kareckas closing in on his teammate, who at the early stages of this race really seemed to be in a position where it was borderline whether or not it would be enough to take the championship, but it's all unravelled for the Lithuanian, and another day with promise and potential for the number one car just has spiralled a little bit out of control. But I tell you, neither of the Veloce Porsches have felt quite as planted as we've often seen them. They were very sketchy in qualifying. Whitehead hasn't been able to extract the sort of pace that we're used to seeing from him this season, and Kareckas, although definitely has been the quicker of the two for the most part, now with all of the scraps, the damage, and I think the extra tyre wear from the big slide that he had through this part of the circuit not too long ago, which of course actually that was the incident between Schaefer and Kareckas, wasn't it, that sent Kareckas sliding through the S's, that now the Lithuanian does just seem to be suffering a bit of a penalty of those older tyres, those more burnt out tyres, and he's caught the gravel and the grass. You've got to be careful with that. We've seen time and time again on the exit of Dunlop Curve, cars ending up coming unstuck and going into the gravel, and that really would seal the deal. But right now Whitehead really does look to be the one that is feeling more confident in his car as he think about dive towards the inside, closing in under braking, but unable to do anything. You hear the TC kicking in for Kareckas in front. Side-by-side action between Schneckenberger and Sean Tempest. Tricky on the run towards the first exit. I think Samir Fox says he doesn't want anything to do with that whatsoever. Samir's had some really unfortunate incidents and times being wiped out in the Pro Series races through no fault of his own, and was sensing danger there and decided to back off accordingly. Schneckenberger a little bit wide on the exit of the hairpin there, but I think enough of an advantage maintained, and the Mercedes straight line speed up the hill will end up allowing him to open up a bit of an advantage over the German that follows him. 17 minutes left to go on the clock, and Whitehead still applying the pressure to Kareckas. See, one of my favourite things actually, we'll go on board the That's the wrong direction. There we go. You can't quite see it because of the headlights, but that glowing red exhaust on the Porsche is always a lovely sight in the darkness. But I tell you what, a lovely sight for Luke Whitehead is him trying to overtake the only man that can take the championship away from him. Side-by-side action towards turn 1. Kareckas won't give it up easily. Come back from Whitehead. We haven't really seen these two scrap, but when they do, it's going the way of the British driver. Right now, it's exactly the way the championship is going as well, and that may be all she wrote for Kareckas' title hopes here in Season 9 of the Case King Pro Series, with Whitehead now in P5, Kareckas P6. That really does feel like the last straw, and Whitehead does seem to have had the pace advantage over the last few laps, and if he gets this done mistake-free for what will be about 8 or 9 laps left to go in this race, I find it hard to believe that Grantas is going to be able to respond to the pace of Whitehead, and even then, response is one thing. Getting enough of a points haul turnover to swap those drivers around in the championship is a whole nother thing, and he really did need quite a stroke of luck to some degree today for it to work anyway. But with that said and done, with the number 3 car making their way into P5, I think that may be the championship sealed and sent in the direction of Luke Whitehead's postcode. Tempest still applying the pressure to Schneckenberger, as that is also bringing Mattia De Campo, another one of the Ferraris, into the mix. And the Mercedes then just powers its way out of the hairpin from the BMW, which we seem to be a pretty fast car around here today, but this Spaghetti Racing Mercedes has been involved in quite a few tussles. Definitely pacey in a straight line. Just so good. Actually, about wide line for Tempest as well. Out spoon curves, that won't help him whatsoever. I think also at some point, don't think we've caught when and how that took place, but Bischoff has made his way past Michael Frey. I think that might have taken place on the very last lap, because it was quite a slow lap for Frey on the last one there. But the number 2 car hasn't really escaped in the way I would have expected. I tell you what, though, George Boothby, you absolute madman, 59.5 with 14 minutes left to go. That overcut strategy, if he had been closer to Walsingham and hadn't had the sort of incidents he was involved in at tail end of the race, that Honda seriously could have contested for something at the front of the field, because even Walsingham now is dropping time to Boothby, who is absolutely on a charge. There'll be about 7 laps left to go. He may be able to get the gap down to under 5 seconds, but unless Walsingham makes a mistake, I think it's going to be difficult for Boothby to extract too much more. That is extremely impressive from one of the winningest drivers in the Pro Series. He's only taken 1 victory so far this season, where that was fairly recent, I do believe. That was at Spa, which of course a circuit that really did lend itself to the Honda's characteristics. But great stuff to see George still pushing on, trying to see if he can eke out any extra points to overtake Kareckas in the championship. Now this 4-way scrap for P13 really starting to hot up, with Schneckenberger, Tempest, Fock and De Campo all in this scrap. But the Ferraris at the back with the least amount of overtaking potential in the Italian Outfits car. It's going to be tricky to try to overtake the 2 fastest cars fundamentally around this circuit. It's difficult enough for Tempest to get a run onto Schneckenberger, with that Mercedes just roaring away every single time that they get to a straight line. Also, just as an update, 0.6 of a second dropped by Kareckas to Whitehead last time around. In actual fact, Jurkovic, was 6 tenths faster than Kareckas last time around, and maybe just about enough time on the clock to still do something about Lithuanian's P6 position. So his day could go from bad to worse. Good exit from Sean Tempest there, a little bit compromised for Schneckenberger. But I think horsepower is going to be the saviour of the German as he makes his way towards turn 1, because even in the slipstream, the BMW just not gaining whatsoever, just barely hanging with the outright grunt. But that may present an opportunity. Almost down the inside at turn 2 was the BMW, as the front tyres, I think, really starting to give out now on the front well, excuse me, of course the front tyres on the front of the car. Where else would they be? On board the number 16 car, and that Mercedes. Not quite sure when Schneckenberger went into the pits. I think it may have been fairly early on in the race relative to those around him. And they are wearing out. Walsinger took a bit more of a central pit stop in this race. Boothby, again, 0.6 of a second faster last time around, so still making significant inroads as we approach the final 11.5 minutes of this race. And the final 11.5 minutes of this season. It's been absolutely stellar stuff, start to finish. De Campo putting a move around the outside. That's brave to do that at hairpin. Won't be able to make it stick. He's able to compromise the line of Samir in front of him. And if anything, he might be able to just put a bit of distance between that Ferrari in front and the BMW in front of the number 7 car. Make it a bit trickier for Samir to stay in the tow and just even up the odds a little bit between himself and the Latvian driver in front of him. De Campo still applying the pressure as he tries to make his way in towards the top 15 in that number 8 Ferrari. Gaps up and down the rest of the order, although chopping and changing a little bit right now. These are your closest battles on circuit. Oh, was Jardier's hand off? Jardier's had a big off on the exit of 130R, I think. I don't think he was too close to Marquezing. Goes into that corner there, the car, and was exactly what we saw with the Porsche earlier on of bubbling. Just completely steps out from underneath him, was so close to the wall there. I imagine that he would have, well, trying to make himself as small as possible, would have certainly been sucking in kind of much air to try to avoid. Oh, so that's a big moment again! And Jardier's lost it on the exit of turn 2. It's all fallen apart for the Czech driver, and he's certainly, he's not going to lose any positions in the process. But I wonder if those tyres have just absolutely gone into ballistic melt mode through all the heat that would have been pumped through those. Could be tricky if he's going to start to reel in the Czech driver. But unusual couple of mistakes in a very short space of time from Jardier there, running around a little bit on his own, maybe trying to push a little bit too hard. John Tempest dipping a wheel into the grass there, manages to get away with no particular repercussions in all of that. The gap's all fairly well maintained between this quadruplet, but I think Jardier's hopes of hunting down Marquezing for P11 have somewhat gone out the window. Gerardis has been teetering on the edge of being able to put pressure onto Addison time and time again, but hasn't quite been able to get himself in a position to set up a move wide again from Schneckenberger, but the horsepower is just going to allow that Mercedes to run away up the hill as there's a yellow flag out for Hoffman. That is Dunlop Curve, I think, where he's put a wheel in the gravel, has he? And he has. Oh, and he's done a little bit more than that. Big chance slapper, and he does catch the wall, side-on contact with the rear of the car. A few white flags out as well for some drivers. I think De Campo may have gone a bit wide through the through Spoon Curve. Gerardis closed up to the back of Luke Addison once again as the scrap between the two Beamers inside of the top 10 continues to take place. Couch Potato Racing versus Spaghetti Racing. It's Battle of the Foods between Schneckenberger and Tempest. On the run up towards Cascasio Triangle is the closest these two have been in a while, and it's a compromised exit as well for the Mercedes, and Tempest trying to force the issue, trying to get towards that inside line, and there is not a car's width there to be found. Now finds himself going side by side, but I think the position, Mercedes has the straight line speed and is able to swoop back in front of the number 15 car. Samir and Mattia still watching eagle-eyed on this battle. Also just checking on your leaders, that spurt of pace that Boothby had still was faster than Walsingham last time round, but not quite on the sort of level it was before. Only a 10th gained. Has brought the gap down to under 7 seconds, but I think in the closing stages of the race it's going to be difficult to see anything further change in that. Also just having a quick look at the stewards' inquiries. Nothing else has resulted in a penalty thus far, as these two will fly through your screen. Samuel Ratz in the background of this little tussle as well. Michael Frey has done an excellent job of staying on to the back of Bischoff, who really seems to have struggled in this phase of the race. I'm not sure if he has a problem with his car or there's something that's maybe gone wrong. His tyres aren't in the right sort of pressure window, but the German driver obviously had that drive-through penalty, but he was running around well inside of the top 10 up prior to that point. So it just seems to really fallen away. In actual fact, Frey again gaining towards the hairpin. So not the day that the reigning two-time Pro Series champion and soon to kind of lose that reigning title, as Samir now has found an opportunity to get alongside the BMW of Sean Tempest. Can't make it stick though, as that BMW will have the straight line speed. It's allowed Schneckenberger though to escape a little bit further up the field and get a few car lengths between himself and the Beamer behind, as this four-way fight for P13 still raging on. Just need to check in with Grantas and Addison. That's still a very tight fight between the two BMWs. Again, though, a small mistake for the Greek driver. Not too detrimental there, but just opening up about half a car's length to the BMW in front. They need to have been so evenly matched on pace in this race. And of course, it's difficult when you're on in identical cars as well to really have much of an offset in terms of where you are quicker than those around you. Tempest managed to escape somewhat away from the Ferrari of Samir just behind, and starts to rein in, or reel in the gap, excuse me, of Schneckenberger. And De Campo still applying the pressure to the Latvian driver ahead of him. Michael Frey still doing the same to Bischoff in the battle for what is 22nd position. Sean Tempest now launches an attacker around the outside. Oh, there's going to be almost contact. How did they get away with that? And Sean Tempest makes an absolute bonsai move around the outside. That was fantastic stuff from the BMW driver. Schneckenberger ended up compromised out of Dunlop curve, now under pressure from Samir. I want to go back and look at it on the replay, but I think it's all going to kick off in just a moment, with the Mercedes gaining surely as they make their way up towards Spoon Curve. Lifts off the throttle then. A little bit of wide entry though for Tempest. And we know how quick this Mercedes is in a straight line. He's got a pretty smart exit out of Spoon Curve. It's a little bit better for the BMW behind, in front, but the Mercedes already gaining towards 130R. This is going to be tricky. This is not going to be a nice experience for the pair of them, and he has to back out of it. Tempest has to grab a little bit of brake on the entry towards 130R then, and here comes Samir and De Campo as well, but they can't make anything happen as they stacked up in front. Dom Healy's brought out the Wild Things. A bit of a wide moment for the Wild Things Aston Martin. De Campo now trying to apply the pressure to Fock in front. He's got a good run towards turn one. It's the first opportunity the Italian has really had. Looking to go around the outside. A fellow Ferrari maybe about to join in the action. Small amount of contact dodged on the entry into the first turn. Samuel Ratz can't get involved, and they all maintain position there. But time running out for these drivers to try to make their way through and make up any further positions. Boothby back in the 59s. Gapped Hutchinson by 5.5 seconds. That is mega impressive. Lentas versus Kay Zeisler, I think, may have just swapped around. Unless that is the leaderboard getting a little bit enthusiastic with positions again. No, that was definitely a swapping position. Whether or not something happened prior to that and Zeisler gave the position back, I am not too sure. We didn't quite catch it, unfortunately. But either way, the Swiss driver making their way up into 25th position. Samuel Ratz now applying the pressure to what is a five-way tussle for P13. Realistically P14 now, with Tempest having managed to escape by about a second, but just return back to George Boothby. Yes, almost 6 seconds now the gap to Hutchinson, gaining another half a second over Walsingham on the last lap. I'll tell you what though, Walsingham out of nowhere sets his fastest lap of the race, and Boothby's fastest lap must have been slightly invalidated because the 59.4 is not registered as the fastest lap on the server. The 59.717 just done by your race leader with only a couple of laps left to go. That is a mighty effort from the number 13 car to make his way back into the 59s, 59s, and Boothby lapping about a tenth and a half just behind. Ratz going a bit wide, I think, through 130R, dropping back from De Campo. And we've got drag races taking place towards turn one once more. Grantas unable to make a move on to the back of Addison, still locked onto the gearbox of the South African, but still can't make anything happen. What about De Campo this time around? Too far back is the answer to Samir Fock. as Schneckenberg suddenly gained under braking there to Sean Tempest. There'll be a wide line for Samir in the background. That could present an opportunity. Yellow flag out for number 27 car, who has had a bit of an incident. That is Malansky on the run up towards Spoon Curve. Oh dear, that is a tank slapper and a half, fishtailing his way back and forth. We didn't see the beginning of it, but I think he stayed too tight to that right-hand side. I'll try to go on board with someone in a moment. As Walsingham will be starting the final lap after he next crosses the line. We'll try to go on board with somebody who's making their way up towards Spoon at the moment. Let's see. We'll stay on board with this battle, actually, and I'll try to show the part of the circuit I mean, because there's a little divot in the inside of this next turn. Schneckenberger goes deep under brakes. I think Mercedes Power will help him, but I think the Audi stay too tight to this inside line. It's right there after that little flash of curb just before the cones. If you put a wheel over the inside of that and you're in a car that is not particularly happy about dealing with those curves, you do get quite a shot through suspension, and a horrible feeling. That was the catalyst to that fishtailing moment for Malansky, who has since then gone to the pits, which is a big shame. He's only a couple of laps from finishing the race, but obviously deciding that he wants nothing more to do with Suzuka. Walsingham, whereabouts is he at the moment? Just make his way through the S's on his final lap. Boothby taking another half a second out, closing the gap to 6 seconds. But I think it's going to be too little too late from the British driver. Similar story perhaps for the likes of Gerardis, that has been hunting down Addison for such a long time. But these two so even on pace and still unable to make anything happen. And what about the fight between Samir Fock, De Campo and Schneckenberger? Tempest, who managed to get by with that brilliant move around the outside, has managed to escape, but Samir can't escape out of the clutches out of his fellow Ferrari. But De Campo hasn't quite got enough of an overlap unless he can get to the inside line, in which he can't. Will stay in position. As what has happened there? Has Clifford made the same mistake? Just waiting on the replay. No, it has just come to a very abrupt, slow pace. I wonder if is he slowing down to allow Walsingham to lap him, which he has, and then just to finish the race a little bit soon. I wonder if he had a fuel miscalculation. Yeah, he does seem to be driving particularly slowly, so I'm not quite sure what has happened for Jonathan Clifford there. But this man, he hasn't had much coverage on the stream, but that has simply been because he has been faultless. The final run through 130R then, Aidan Walsingham, he took a stellar pole position. He's capitalised on all the characteristics of this Mercedes around the Suzuka race circuit. And for Visceral Esports then, in the number 13, he flashes the lights in celebration, and rightfully so. Walsingham will be your final winner of Season 9 here in the Case King Pro Series. Well deserved. Hard charge from George Boothby to go from P5 to P2 in the last race. We'll have to see how that all fares on points for the battle between himself and Kareckas. Hutchinson had an eventful day, but stays where he started in P3. Robin Schaefer finishes P4, and your champion of Season 9 then here in the Case King Pro Series, Luke Whitehead. It wasn't the easiest days for him, but he just did what he needed to do. He stayed calm, he stayed composed, and he was under immense pressure in the early phase of this race, and a very, very well-deserved newly crowned champion to Luke Whitehead. And also apparently a drive-through on the last lap for Sean Tempest, which will drop him down the order. Gerardis wasn't able to make the move on Addison in the end. And Tempest, after all of his hard work to get into P13, will drop down the order considerably. After that, Samuel Ratz, I think, has just sent it into the inside wall to the right-hand side. Swapping a position on the last lap of the race. Zeisler versus Hoffman there. As that is Siggy Lentus just in front of these two, I do believe it is. But the Aston Martin of Zeisler managing to make a decisive move on the last lap of the race to get himself up into 25th position and cross over the finish line. And that will be it then for not just Suzuka, but the Case King Pro Series here in Season 9. What an absolutely fantastic evening of action. We'll have a look through the results very shortly from that one and get confirmation over the finishing order. Also, if we're lucky, we may also get some interviews with our finishers and newly crowned champion as well. But what a drive from Walsingham. Fantastic effort from him in the Mercedes. Looked absolutely in control from start to finish. And as quick as he was all day, he's also come in very quickly for an interview, which I do believe we're going to try to coordinate over with the guys on Twitch as well. So I will just try to sort that out with Björn over on the Twitch channel. And see if we can sort that one out. And then we will hopefully get a word with Walsingham in just a moment. But the Mercedes driver doing an... Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I turned off my microphone and all that because I hit my push to mute. But Walsingham has been in fantastic control from start to finish today. And although that overcut strategy from Boothby really did put a little bit of just a small amount of doubt whether or not he could do something remarkable in the closing stage of this race, it was not enough to stop Walsingham from going to his first victory in the Pro Series and taking a dominant one of that. 1,800 points to his tally with Boothby, Hutchinson, Schaefer, Whitehead, your new champion of Season 9, finishing P5 in the end, with the likes of Kareckas, Jurkovic, Makovsky, Addison, and Gerardis rounding out the top 10. And I think we will be joining the guys over in the German stream in just a second, so I'll just finish sorting that out, and then hopefully we can talk to Walsingham, who's sitting there waiting for an interview. And we shall get all of that underway, because it'd be great to talk to your race winner from today. I wonder, it would have probably been a little bit busy at the beginning of the race, but certainly was the one that was able to put it all together. And the guys from Twitch will actually be joining me in the booth in Discord, so we will wait for them to pop on over, and then we will bring Walsingham in for an interview and look to do that. And get all of that underway, because it is always nice to talk to the drivers that we have here in the Pro Series. Hopefully we'll also get word with our newly crowned champion when if he is about as well. So the guys from Twitch should hopefully be making their way over in just a second, and then when we do that, we will then get a word with Walsingham. I am just actually going to send him a quick message to make sure he doesn't go too far away. And Marish and Björn have just made their way into the Discord voice room here, and what a race that was. I mean, just what a fantastic one we witnessed this evening.
Insane. It was insane. It was not that tension we were looking for, because of Whitehead was too strong. He was too strong, but there were one or two situations where it was close, where he's maybe lost his car, but yeah, he managed to do a quite good race. Insane. Just one word for it: insane.
Yeah, we're very busy, a lot of chaos, but one man that had a fairly quiet day for the most part was your race winner. We will bring into the comms box now. Aidan Walsingham, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. Well, big congratulations to you, sir. What a dominant race performance from you. Absolutely putting it together in qualifying. And then your racecraft, your control of the pace all the way throughout there. Boothby was putting a bit of pressure and inroads into your race lead later on with that overcut strategy, but it really never looked kind of in any doubt. Was that how it felt inside the cockpit, or was it still a little bit nervy at times?
I saw the first few laps, like when he started pushing and doing like mid 59s, and I was just chilling, doing some 2 minutes, but it was like I could feel that he was pushing, and I was like, nah, he wants P1, he wants this position, man. So I then like dug a little deeper and tried to. But he had much better tyres, and like his overcut was awesome. really, really, like, he gained a lot of time on me with the overcut, I believe. So, yeah, I felt the pressure of his better tyres and his pace for the last 25 minutes for sure.
Yeah, he was definitely pushing on hard. I think was desperately trying to get as many points as he could to displace his teammate Kareckas, who was dropping down the order a bit and seeing if he can make his way up into P2 in the standings. But what a way to round off your season. It's been I think, particularly considering you've been taking his Mercedes, which whilst undoubtedly was the fastest car today, your performance throughout the season with a car that a lot of the time hasn't had the kind of best outright pace. You've consistently been able to extract some really fast lap times out of it and keep yourself in the mix and sort of put yourself in those battles. And do you think it's a car that you'll stick with going into sort of next season, or do you think you might have a bit of a dabble with one of the other cars that's been perhaps one of the more consistent packages throughout the season?
Well, I'm going to consider it because I've really enjoyed driving the Mercedes this season, whilst it has been suffering at some of the tracks. I've had some really awesome fights with it. That being said, we obviously have the new content coming next month, and
I think something everyone's looking forward to.
Yeah, everybody's looking forward, and it's a quite tough decision because our season starts before the new content is coming. So yeah, this will be quite interesting, the choices of the cars there.
That's a very good point. Are you guys gonna allow people to switch to the new versions?
We talked about it. It's not. I'm not sure. Therefore, I don't want to say anything to this. We will announce it on our Discord and in the rules and so on. I think so. But yeah, that's not the final word of it.
Of course.
Yeah, we put the man on the spot with with that one, and I mean, because I have no doubts that if that is an option, whether or not it is, we will wait and see. But if that is an option, I imagine that we are going to have quite the abundance of Ferraris and Lamborghinis in the field, and and I mean there was, I think, also rumours of perhaps an updated Porsche on the way as well. We're not kind of too sure as to whether or not that'll arrive with the update at the same time. We've obviously had the 296 and the second Lamborghini confirmed. So so I imagine there could be a potential abundance of Porsche, Lambos, and Ferraris in next season's grid. But we'll have to wait and see on that front. That's any further words from you, Marius and Björn?
No additional questions. I'm so done. I'm so exhausted because
it might have been a quiet race.
Congratulations to Aiden. Great performance from the beginning, as John said, qualifying and then from the start. Pretty good race from you. Amazing pace, and I think you're a deserved winner for today's race.
Thank you.
Yeah, it might have been a quiet race for you out front, but we had quite the madness in the COS box, looking at a variety of other things that were taking place. So you I think may have got a few bits of street coverage from time to time, but yes, your pace and managing to pull that sort of gap that you did put yourself in such a commanding position in that race. So yeah, huge congratulations to you, Aiden. And also thank you for joining for an interview as well. It is a rare luxury sometimes in the Pro Series we get to speak to too many of our drivers. So big thank you to you for joining for an interview, and congratulations once again on a stellar way to round off the season. And look forward to seeing you back next season for whatever potential car choices you end up making over the course of the over the next couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it'll be a spinny wheel. We'll see.
just flip a. Well, may have to flip a sort of a 12-sided die at this point.
That dies it out.
But we look forward to having you back. And once again, huge congratulations to you today.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Aiden.
Cheers. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, John, the final results are there. I think we have to say big congratulations for Luke Whitehead. He was so good in this season. Only in week 3 he had a bad result, but all the other races are quite of dominating there. So he's the deserved winner of the Season 9 Pro Series. Yeah, I think we can show the results. I don't know if you have the source there, but I think so.
Yeah, I think I think I've got the results. Although I was just looking at the yeah, I do believe that is the final points total. In that I was just checking that with what has gone through on all of that, and yeah, you know, he was just so stellar all season long. Like I say, he had kind of one sort of ropey race that didn't really go to plan, and you know, I mean, that's kind of, you know, what was sort of what was kind of being said today in the comms box was the fact of, like, he has set the benchmark for himself to be so high that kind of when we saw him in qualifying being nearer to the tail end of the top 10 and under pressure in the early laps from the likes of Schaefer, Jurkovic, Bukowski, it felt so uncharacteristic to find Luke in that sort of position where he was just not really kind of running away with kind of those up at the front and really in that lead pack. But for the most part, he has just been unflappable all season long. Has been very consistent in what he's extracted out of the car. And fundamentally, you know, when it came down to not buckling under pressure from this evening's race, he was able to keep calm and collected and just do exactly what he needed to do. And in the end, actually outscoring, you know, his main championship contender that was battling him for in the late stages of that. So yeah, just a masterful performance from him all season long.
There's nothing additional I can say. That's you summed it up correctly. It's he's the deserved winner from Season 9 CaseKing.de Pro Series. We are looking forward to the next season. Yes, it's quite interesting. It's quite yeah. We will see. We will see. I think there will be a possibility to change to the next generation car, but we didn't talk about it. We will see. We will see. We will announce it. Last, I want to say thank you to you, John, for your 3 seasons broadcaster for us now, and you do an amazing job. You're such an awesome broadcaster. I love to watch your streams when I'm not broadcasting by myself. Yeah, big thanks to you, and I think we will see us again in the next season. Hopefully. Yeah,
without a doubt. Yeah, well, yeah, well, thank you very much for the kind words. You know, it's been an awesome adventure all the way back from August last year, and very much looking forward into the future to everything that the Pro Series or whatever other ventures have to offer with all of that. So thoroughly looking forward to all of that. And yeah, next season, you know, with how things play out kind of with the new car selections and everything, it's going to be a very interesting one, and, you know, could potentially bring about a serious shake-up in the field, which of course maybe amongst the drivers isn't always the most comfortable positions to be in. You kind of want to know kind of where you're going to sit, but from our perspective, and also all of those watching in the chat kind of week in, week out, it makes our life very exciting for kind of potentially seeing some new names at the front and a bit of a shake-up to the status quo. So I think a lot of things to look forward to going into next season.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think such a good season, and maybe it brings up some new tension, and therefore we need also some good commentators. So looking forward to watch your streams also.
We are fans of John. We have underwear with John's face on. Okay, let's stop here.
That's one way to wrap up season 9 with all of that. I'm not sure if that's quite going to make it to the LFM merchandise page, but I'll leave that to all of you to organise.
Some new things to discuss, I think.
Well, definitely to discuss whether or not to.
It's noted. It's noted.
Yeah, definitely noted. I think almost a steward's inquiry worthy of something like that. But yeah, always a pleasure, and you know, also great to have a little sort of a wrap up between ourselves at the end of the season for what has been a stellar kind of series of 12 races. So yeah, big thank you obviously to you for coordinating all the stuff on the German stream as well. and to Top Level Racing TV for all of their input on the Spanish side of the streams as well. So it's been a big season of kind of new things. I think this was also our first season of live stewards for Top Split, if I remember that correctly. So a lot of firsts that we've had this season. We've had a new champion, we've had new changes to the whole Pro Series platform. But the one thing that hasn't changed is that we've just had absolute incredible drama and action from start to finish in every single race, and that's the one thing that I never want to change from this series. So just another one to add to the books and to look forward to going into season 10.
Amen.
Brilliant.
John, thank you for doing this interview. Greetings to all your viewers, but I think we have to close it down now.
Yes, I shall let you get back to your stream. But thank you very much for coming in, and and so we could round off this season in the right way.
Yes.
Cheerio,
so John,
you two.
Cheerio.
Fantastic then to have Björn and Marius joining us for a little bit of a roundup then for the final race of this season. Also, a big thank you as well to Andy and Chris. They've also been covering some streams over on Twitch throughout the season. I don't think I've missed out any from all of that. And of course, also massive thanks goes to those stewards that I was just talking about that have just been doing an immense amount of work. Huge thanks as well to the whole of the LFM team that organised such a massive abundance of things I wouldn't even be able to comprehend to keep this show up and running. So all of that, and of course big thank you to the sponsors of the series of caseking.de, bringing all of those prizes to you, and a bit of a reminder of what those prizes exactly were. So for Luke Whitehead, he will get a Sensation Pro Actifit cockpit as well as €300. To Grantas Kareckas, he will get a Moser FSR Lenkrad racing wheel adapter and universal hub and an extra €200 to go along with that. And George Boothby will go away with a Noble Chairs Black Epic Edition at €100 as well. And all of those, like I say, prizes brought to you by caseking.de. So big thank you to them for supporting the series. And the final thanks, of course, has to go to all of you that have been supporting in the chat. Over this season, we have eclipsed new goals, milestones, had fantastic races week in, week out. And it's been a pleasure to have each and every single one of you joining me in the chat on Wednesday evenings to witness what these guys have been getting up to. So big thank you to all of you. If you have enjoyed what you have seen today or throughout the rest of this season, then do consider subscribing to the channel as we continue to grow this community. And also, if you fancy getting involved in some of the racing yourself, then do head over to the lofuelmotorsport.com website. Get yourself signed up, get yourself a license, and work your way through the ranks, and you could be competing for some fantastic prizes yourself here in the Pro Series as well. And also other prizes in the daily racing for ACC. And of course, if ACC isn't quite your thing, R Factor 2 is now on the LFM platform with categories in prototypes, touring cars, single-seaters. There's something a little bit for everyone. If you're looking on the adrenaline side of things, there's also a Nordschleife specific championship. So if you really want to lay everything on the line, then there is also that to contend with as well. And if you just want to be a part of this growing community and just talk amongst all of these drivers already on the platform and just those that love watching everything that LFM has to offer, then do consider joining the Discord server as well, where you can share all of that passion for motorsport, both real and virtual, amongst this ever-growing community. I think on the LFM platform championship signed up. So if you really want to, as I've just activated my own stream, apologies for that, everybody, that we have almost 83,500 users now on LFM. So just continuing to break new boundaries and grow this community even further. So it's been an absolute pleasure to bring you coverage over here on the YouTube channel for the CaseKing.de Pro Series Championship this season, and we'll be back very shortly in a couple of weeks' time to kick things off for Season 10 and making our way into double figures, so do not miss it. Thank you everybody so much for watching, but for now then, it's goodbye.